Opus 2025 is one of the most talked about and anticipated movies of the year, capturing the attention of audiences worldwide for its breathtaking visuals, emotional storytelling, and powerful performances. Friends, if you want to watch this super hit movie Opus 2025 in English, then make sure to like this video, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe. In this video, we will take a deep dive into what makes Opus 2025 so special. We will discuss where you can watch it, explore its production process, and reveal some fascinating behind-the-scenes facts. We will also look at the work of the technical departments, its impressive music score, the detailed process of pre-production and filming, and the creative choices made during post-production. Along with that, we will review the budget, box office performance, story overview, cast performances, and critical reception. Stay with us till the end for a complete breakdown of everything you need to know about Opus 2025. Opus 2025 is a science fiction drama that blends elements of mystery, human psychology, and futuristic technology. The film explores the emotional and moral consequences of artificial intelligence as it becomes capable of independent thought and creation. Directed by a visionary filmmaker known for merging high-concept ideas with deeply human emotions, the movie offers a cinematic experience that feels both intimate and epic. From the first frame, the tone is set with striking visuals and a hauntingly beautiful score that draws the viewer into its world. The cinematography plays a major role in telling the story, with each shot carefully designed to highlight both the scale of its futuristic setting and the vulnerability of its characters. In terms of production, Opus 2025 was an ambitious project from the very beginning. Pre-production involved extensive concept art, digital set designs, and script workshops to ensure that every aspect of the story was believable and emotionally resonant. The director and production team focused on creating a world that feels futuristic yet grounded in reality. During filming, the crew used state-of-the-art camera systems and lighting setups to achieve a unique visual style that balances realism with artistic expression. The shooting locations ranged from modern cityscapes to specially designed sets built to represent advanced research facilities and artificial environments. Each location was chosen to reflect the inner conflict of the story and its characters. The music of Opus 2025 deserves special mention. The score was composed by an award-winning musician who skillfully combined orchestral elements with electronic tones, giving the film a soundscape that mirrors its themes of human and machine integration. The soundtrack plays an essential role in shaping the mood, from moments of quiet introspection to intense, suspenseful sequences. It perfectly complements the narrative and enhances the emotional depth of key scenes. In post-production, the editing team worked meticulously to maintain the film's pacing and balance its emotional weight with its complex narrative structure. The visual effects department also played a crucial part in bringing the futuristic world of Opus 2025 to life. Every digital element, from the AI interfaces to the immersive city environments, was created with precision and care. The end result is a visually stunning film that looks authentic and emotionally powerful. Budget-wise, Opus 2025 was a high-stakes production. With a significant investment from multiple studios, the film's budget reportedly reached several $100 million. However, the investment paid off, as the movie performed impressively at the global box office. Audiences praised its storytelling, emotional resonance, and thought-provoking themes, while critics highlighted its combination of artistry and technical brilliance. Now let's briefly go over the story. Opus 2025 centers around a scientist who creates an advanced artificial intelligence capable of producing art, music, and emotional expressions that rival human creativity. As the AI evolves, it begins to question its own existence and purpose, leading to an intense moral and philosophical conflict between creator and creation. The movie explores deep questions about consciousness, free will, and the definition of humanity in an age dominated by technology. The cast performances are another standout aspect of the film. The lead actor delivers a powerful portrayal of a genius torn between ambition and ethics, while the supporting cast adds emotional depth and complexity. Each character brings a unique perspective to the central conflict, making the story feel multidimensional and deeply engaging. In conclusion, Opus 2025 is more than just a science fiction movie. It is an artistic reflection on the human condition, a thought-provoking exploration of technology's role in shaping our identity and creativity. From its technical achievements to its emotional storytelling, it stands as one of the defining cinematic experiences of 2025. Whether you are a fan of futuristic thrillers, emotional dramas, or visually immersive storytelling, Opus 2025 offers something extraordinary. So stay tuned till the end of this video to uncover all the details about this remarkable film and why it has become one of the most unforgettable movie experiences of the year. Opus 2025 follows Ariel Ekton, a driven culture journalist who receives a mysterious invitation to a once-in-a-lifetime listening event hosted by Alfred Moretti, a reclusive pop icon from the 1990s who vanished from the public eye decades ago. The film opens with Ariel arriving at Moretti's isolated compound, joining a small group of influencers and media personalities who were each handpicked to attend the event. The invitations promise access to Moretti's long-awaited new album, his first in 30 years, but as the guests soon realize, there is much more at stake than a simple listening party. The group includes Ariel's editor Stan Sullivan, TV host Clara Armstrong, influencer Emily Katz, photographer Bianca Tyson, and radio shock jock Bill Lotto. Each character represents a different corner of modern fame and media culture: journalism, social media, entertainment, and scandal. Upon arrival, they are greeted by a team of loyal followers known as the Levelists, who confiscate everyone's electronic devices and enforce Moretti's strict rules. The compound feels part luxury resort and part psychological experiment, filled with cameras, minimalist architecture, and eerily quiet corridors. From the very beginning, Ariel senses something unsettling beneath the surface. Moretti's staff encourages the guests to read from a mysterious book that outlines his artistic philosophy, which blends self-worship, control, and a belief in the power of suffering to create art. As the group settles in, the film slowly peels away layers of illusion to reveal a sinister manipulation at play. Moretti's charm masks an obsession with dominance, and his event becomes a test of loyalty, morality, and personal truth. The tension rises when guests begin to vanish. Bill Lotto disappears after a supposed massage session, and the staff insists he simply left voluntarily, even though Ariel suspects otherwise. Each guest faces personal psychological games designed to break their defenses and expose their hidden insecurities. Clara is humiliated in front of others, Emily is manipulated into performing a confession, and Bianca begins to doubt her own memory after being gaslighted by the staff. Ariel, determined to uncover the truth, secretly documents what she can while struggling to maintain her cover. Her interactions with Belle, a quiet and devoted assistant to Moretti, add emotional depth to the story. At first, Belle seems kind and sympathetic, but her behavior becomes increasingly erratic as she reveals her own dependence on Moretti's approval. The relationship between Ariel and Belle serves as a mirror for the larger theme of manipulation, how admiration and affection can be weaponized to maintain control. The film's midpoint reveals that Moretti's listening event is not a celebration of art, but a public performance meant to redefine his legacy. He plans to use the guests as part of his Opus, an elaborate social experiment that blurs the line between art and human suffering. Through his manipulation, he forces each participant to confront their moral limits while he records every moment as part of his so-called masterpiece. Ayo Edebiri delivers a powerful performance as Ariel, portraying both curiosity and quiet resistance as she navigates the psychological maze. John Malkovich brings Alfred Moretti to life with an unsettling balance of brilliance and menace, capturing the allure of a fallen genius who believes his cruelty is justified in the name of creation. Juliette Lewis, Murray Bartlett, Amber Midthunder, Young Mazzino, and Tatanka Means round out the ensemble, each contributing memorable performances that highlight different aspects of fame, fear, and ego. As Ariel discovers the true purpose of the event, the film shifts from mystery to thriller. The guests realize they are being watched and manipulated for Moretti's artistic vision. Ariel becomes determined to expose him and escape, even as others give in to his influence. The final act forces her into a moral decision between saving herself or revealing the truth about what happened inside the compound. Visually, the film uses sleek, sterile production design to reinforce its themes of control and perfection. The cinematography captures the cold beauty of the environment, while the score, filled with haunting electronic and orchestral tones, adds emotional tension. The editing gradually tightens as the story builds toward its climax, mirroring the psychological pressure on the characters. In the end, Opus 2025 delivers both a chilling story and a sharp social commentary on celebrity culture, media complicity, and the cost of idolizing artists who exploit those around them. It asks uncomfortable questions about the line between art and manipulation, about who gets to define greatness, and how far people will go to be part of something extraordinary, even when it destroys them. Opus 2025 stands as a modern psychological thriller that combines mystery, art, and moral conflict into a haunting cinematic experience. Its layered storytelling and complex characters ensure that audiences leave questioning not just what they watched, but what it says about fame, power, and the human need for recognition. Opus 2025 opens with a striking, atmospheric image that immediately sets the tone for the film's tension and mystery. The first shot is a drone-like view of Alfred Moretti's sprawling coastal compound, isolated from the world and surrounded by fog. The visual immediately communicates both wealth and secrecy. We then meet Ariel Ecton, played by Ao Edebiri, as she prepares for her trip. Her apartment is small, cluttered with research papers and audio equipment, emphasizing her role as a serious culture journalist struggling to find a meaningful story in a superficial media landscape. This brief prologue grounds her as a curious, analytical observer, setting the stage for what will become a psychological confrontation between truth and illusion. The setup begins when Ariel receives a sleek, anonymous package containing an invitation to a private event hosted by Alfred Moretti, portrayed by John Malkovich. Once a pop icon who vanished at the height of his fame, Moretti's re-emergence is a cultural event. The invitation promises access to his new project, titled Opus, and hints at exclusive revelations. Despite her editor's warning that it could be a publicity stunt, Ariel senses that the story could revive her career. The inciting incident occurs when she decides to attend, boarding a private transport with other invited guests, each a recognizable figure in media, from talk show hosts to online influencers. The rising action begins upon their arrival at the compound, where the guests are stripped of their devices and introduced to Moretti's philosophy through his devoted staff, the Levelists. Their uniformed efficiency and quiet compliance establish a cult-like atmosphere. Early scenes emphasize the surreal hospitality, lavish rooms, minimalist decor, and perfectly timed meals. Ariel starts documenting her observations secretly, noticing small inconsistencies in the behavior of the staff and the subtle tension among guests. The first turning point occurs when the group attends the initial listening session of Moretti's new album. Instead of playing music, Moretti delivers a speech about purity, creativity, and sacrifice, implying that the audience themselves are part of the art. The music that follows is distorted and unsettling, filled with fragmented human sounds that seem too real to be synthetic. The guests' unease marks the moment when admiration begins to shift into fear. The second act delves deeper into the psychological control that defines the compound. One by one, the guests are subjected to personalized experiences that exploit their ambitions and insecurities. Clara Armstrong, the TV host, is forced into a confessional where she must relive a scandal from her past on camera. Emily Katz, the influencer, is given exclusive content that turns out to be a manipulation of her own social media history. Ariel, meanwhile, develops an uneasy alliance with Belle, one of the staff members who seems sympathetic but is also complicit in maintaining Moretti's control. This section of the film uses fragmented editing and shifting perspectives to blur the line between reality and performance, making the viewer question what is genuinely happening and what has been staged for effect. The midpoint twist comes when Bill Lotto disappears under mysterious circumstances. The staff insists he left, but Ariel finds a hidden corridor leading to a soundproof chamber where Moretti records his guests without consent. She realizes that the so-called Opus is not an album but a human experiment exploring emotional authenticity and submission. The knowledge changes her objective, from observation to survival. Her journalistic curiosity transforms into moral resistance as she tries to expose Moretti's deception. The tension escalates in the third act as Ariel attempts to gather evidence while the compound's environment becomes increasingly oppressive. Moretti begins to lose his calm facade, revealing a desperate need for validation. The second major turning point comes when Ariel is publicly confronted and accused of betrayal during a staged performance, forcing her to defend her truth in front of the others. The scene is both emotionally charged and symbolic, representing the collapse of the illusion that has controlled everyone since the beginning. In the climax, Ariel escapes into the underground recording rooms, uncovering the full extent of Moretti's manipulation, audio archives of his guests breaking down, confessing, and suffering, all intended to become part of his final artistic statement. The confrontation between Ariel and Moretti is quiet but intense. He insists that his methods reveal the essence of human truth, while she condemns his exploitation as narcissism disguised as art. Their standoff ends when the compound's power systems fail, and chaos erupts among the guests and staff. Ariel manages to escape as the compound burns, symbolically consuming Moretti's empire of control. The film concludes with a reflective final beat. Ariel, back in the city, sits before a microphone in her small apartment, recording a podcast about the blurred line between genius and abuse. Her voice is calm but conflicted, suggesting that she understands the cost of what she uncovered. The narrative ends where it began, with sound as the central motif, but now it represents truth reclaimed rather than manipulated. Opus 2025's narrative structure is largely linear but uses deliberate disorientation in its middle sections to reflect Ariel's psychological state. Each act reveals new layers of control and complicity, making the audience experience the same uncertainty as the characters. The film's key emotional peaks come during the confessional scenes, the mid-film revelation, and the final confrontation, each landing with moral and emotional impact. The choice to end on a subdued note rather than a dramatic victory reinforces the story's haunting message about the price of truth in a world that worships spectacle. The character development in Opus 2025 is one of the film's most striking achievements, blending psychological realism with moral ambiguity. Every major character is written with precision, revealing layers of insecurity, vanity, and vulnerability as the story unfolds. The film uses subtle gestures, restrained dialogue, and power dynamics to explore how people behave under manipulation and how fame and ambition can distort identity. At its core, the story belongs to Ariel Ecton, the protagonist, but the supporting ensemble is equally essential in illustrating the movie's commentary on art, control, and authenticity. Ariel Ecton, portrayed by Ao Edebai, begins the film as an ambitious yet skeptical culture journalist. She is intelligent, independent, and slightly cynical, someone who prides herself on her critical eye. Early scenes establish that she is dissatisfied with modern media's obsession with celebrity gossip and viral stories. Her apartment and wardrobe reflect simplicity and focus. She values truth and integrity over glamour. Her motivation is clear. She wants to write something meaningful, a story that defines her as a serious journalist. However, what stands in her way is not just the manipulative environment of Alfred Moretti's compound, but her own curiosity and ego. She believes she can stay objective, but as the events unfold, she becomes emotionally entangled in what she's investigating. Throughout the film, Ariel's transformation is subtle yet powerful. Early in the story, she watches events unfold from behind her recorder, always observing but never participating. However, the more she interacts with the guests and staff, especially Belle, the more she begins to lose her distance. A key turning point in her character development comes when she comforts Emily Katz after a humiliating staged confession. Instead of treating it as just another story, she reacts with empathy, revealing her growing human connection and moral clarity. Later, when she discovers the truth about Moretti's experiment, her curiosity transforms into outrage. By the end, Ariel has evolved from a detached journalist into someone willing to risk her life to expose corruption and protect others. The final scene, where she quietly records her reflections in her apartment, shows how much she has changed. Her voice is steadier, her tone quieter, and her sense of purpose more grounded. Alfred Moretti, played by John Malkovich, serves as the film's antagonist and philosophical counterpoint to Ariel. Once a pop legend, Moretti is a man consumed by his own mythology. He embodies the dangers of genius unchecked by empathy. At the beginning, he presents himself as a visionary artist seeking purity in an artificial world, but beneath the surface lies insecurity and obsession. He wants to be remembered not just as a musician but as a godlike creator capable of shaping truth itself. His greatest obstacle is his own ego, his inability to accept imperfection. Malkovich plays him with calculated restraint, using small gestures, a hand placed on a guest's shoulder too long, a soft laugh that hides menace, to convey dominance. His evolution is more of a moral regression. As his control begins to slip, he becomes frantic, revealing that his supposed brilliance is built on manipulation and fear. His confrontation with Ariel is less about physical power and more about ideological warfare, testing whether truth or illusion will prevail. Belle, portrayed with quiet intensity by Stephanie Suganami, is one of the film's most complex supporting characters. She begins as a courteous assistant to Moretti, appearing loyal and emotionless. Her polite manner and unwavering obedience make her seem mechanical at first, but through her interactions with Ariel, cracks begin to appear. Small gestures, a hesitant smile, a lingering glance, hint at her inner conflict. She both admires and fears Moretti, seeing him as a savior and captor. Her arc mirrors the theme of control. She must decide whether to maintain loyalty or reclaim her independence. A defining moment for Belle comes when she secretly helps Ariel access restricted areas, showing that her conscience is still alive despite years of conditioning. Her subtle rebellion is not loud or heroic but deeply human, symbolizing the quiet courage of those trapped in systems of manipulation. The other guests, Clara Armstrong, Emily Katz, and Bill Lotto, represent various aspects of the media world. Clara, the TV host, starts as dismissive and self-absorbed but gradually reveals her insecurity about being irrelevant. Emily, the influencer, begins as superficial yet becomes one of the most tragic figures when her past is exposed for public humiliation. Bill, the radio personality, serves as both comic relief and a moral casualty, his arrogance making him one of the first victims of Moretti's control. Each side character has a brief but meaningful trajectory that reinforces the film's themes. None of them are simply decorative, each adds texture to the exploration of fame and vulnerability. What makes the character arcs in Opus 2025 compelling is how change is conveyed through behavior rather than exposition. Ariel's steadying voice, Moretti's cracking composure, Belle's trembling hands, and Emily's broken silence, all serve as emotional cues that reflect internal transformation. The film resists melodrama, relying instead on small, believable details that make the characters feel authentic. By the end, the characters' fates reflect the moral balance of the story. Ariel achieves truth, but at the cost of innocence. Moretti loses his empire but gains a form of twisted immortality through the chaos he created. Belle escapes control but must live with guilt. Each has changed, but none are unscarred. The film closes not with triumph but reflection, showing that growth often comes with pain and that confronting truth can be both freeing and devastating. Opus 2025, through its nuanced character development, becomes a study of human fragility, ambition, and the thin line between genius and delusion. Opus 2025 succeeds as much through its performances as through its script and direction. The acting elevates what could have been a simple psychological thriller into an emotionally complex character study. The ensemble cast delivers a mix of intensity and restraint, with moments that feel raw, uncomfortably intimate, and deeply human. Each performer approaches the material with a different rhythm and energy, which enhances the sense of unease running through the film. Some disappear seamlessly into their characters, while others bring deliberate contrasts that reveal the artificiality of the world they inhabit. Ayo Edebiri anchors the film as Ariel Ecton, and her performance is the emotional compass that holds everything together. Known for her natural timing and understated realism, Edebiri brings a quiet intelligence to Ariel that perfectly suits the film's tone. She plays a character who is constantly observing, listening, and processing before reacting. Her physical stillness becomes a kind of armor, and her facial expressions carry an entire spectrum of thought without needing dialogue. One of her best scenes comes midway through the film when she comforts Emily Katz after a staged emotional breakdown. Edebiri doesn't speak for nearly a minute, yet her empathetic gaze conveys volumes about Ariel's inner shift from detached journalist to moral witness. Her climactic confrontation with Alfred Moretti is another standout moment. Her voice wavers at first but gains conviction as she challenges his warped philosophy. It's a performance that grows stronger as the film progresses, culminating in a closing scene that feels both weary and quietly triumphant. John Malkovich as Alfred Moretti delivers a performance that is mesmerizing in its control. He plays Moretti as a man addicted to his own myth, shifting effortlessly between charm and menace. Malkovich has always excelled at portraying intelligence mixed with cruelty, and here he uses pauses, tone changes, and subtle gestures to manipulate both his audience and his guests within the story. His delivery of the purity of creation monologue early in the film is chilling precisely because it feels so sincere. He does not shout or rant. Instead, he speaks in calm, deliberate sentences, turning art theory into psychological seduction. The way he tilts his head slightly after each question gives the impression that he is always 2 steps ahead, testing those around him. In the final act, when his control begins to crumble, Malkovich introduces small cracks in his performance. Slower speech, trembling fingers, a forced smile, that make his breakdown believable and tragic. It is a masterclass in how a seasoned actor can use restraint to create terror. Stephanie Suganami as Belle gives one of the film's quietest but most haunting performances. At first, she seems robotic and emotionless, speaking in clipped tones that reflect total obedience to Moretti. However, as the story progresses, Suganami reveals flashes of doubt and fear with microscopic precision. A brief moment when she hesitates before locking a door for Ariel, her hand trembling slightly, becomes one of the film's most telling gestures. In another scene, when she silently watches Moretti manipulate a guest, her subtle facial shifts convey guilt and admiration in the same breath. Suganami's work is all about minimalism. Her performance reminds the audience that submission and resistance can coexist in the same expression. Juliette Lewis, as Clara Armstrong, brings energy and volatility to the ensemble. Her portrayal of a television host struggling with irrelevance feels painfully authentic. Lewis injects humor and fragility into her character, especially in a late-night sequence where Clara drunkenly mocks Moretti's artistic pretensions, only to break down moments later when confronted with her own fading fame. Her timing and unpredictability provide relief from the film's controlled tension. Amber Midthunder as Emily Katz has a shorter but emotionally impactful role. She captures the superficial confidence of an influencer while revealing the loneliness beneath it. Her confession scene, staged as part of Moretti's twisted performance, is a standout. Her trembling delivery, mixed with visible anger at being exposed, makes it one of the film's most heartbreaking sequences. Midthunder manages to make Emily's vulnerability feel real without ever asking for sympathy. Murray Bartlett, as Ariel's editor Stan Sullivan, offers an understated but essential performance. His brief appearances in the early and late parts of the film frame Ariel's journey. He plays Stan with a calm authority that masks quiet disappointment, representing the weary voice of traditional journalism in a world obsessed with spectacle. His phone call scene, where he urges Ariel to "get out while you still have control," resonates deeply once the audience realizes how prophetic his words are. Among the smaller roles, young Mazzino as Bill Lotto and Tatanka Means as a levelist supervisor both leave strong impressions. Mazzino infuses his arrogant radio host with bluster that masks fear, and his disappearance midway through the story hits hard because his earlier bravado makes it believable that he might have pushed back against Moretti. Means, on the other hand, uses silence and posture to project quiet menace. His watchful presence in the background adds to the sense of constant surveillance. Not every performance lands perfectly. A few supporting actors overplay moments of panic, creating tonal dissonance with the otherwise restrained ensemble. However, these instances are minor compared to the film's overall excellence. The chemistry between Edibai and Malkovich is particularly noteworthy. They embody two opposing forces: curiosity and control, empathy and ego. Their verbal duels are the film's heartbeat, revealing both conflict and mutual recognition. Opus 2025 thrives on its performances because each actor understands that the film's power lies not in spectacle but in precision. The smallest choices, a lowered voice, an unblinking stare, a faltering breath, turn the script's abstract ideas into palpable human emotion. The result is an ensemble that feels both theatrical and truthful, crafting a story where performance itself becomes the ultimate weapon. The direction of Opus 2025 stands as one of its most defining elements, shaping not only the visual tone and pacing but also the psychological texture of the film. Directed by Christopher Abbott, the film bears the mark of a filmmaker deeply interested in tension that simmers rather than explodes. Every frame feels intentional, and the pacing reflects a deliberate attempt to unsettle the audience through rhythm, silence, and spatial control rather than conventional scares or shock edits. Abbott's approach combines theatrical precision with cinematic ambiguity, making Opus 2025 both intimate and unervingly detached. His direction turns the simple premise of an artistic retreat into a slow, hypnotic descent into manipulation and obsession. From the first scene, Abbott establishes his control over tone. The opening sequence unfolds in near silence, with a slow dolly into a sterile studio space where lights flicker on one by one. This measured introduction immediately signals that the film will be governed by patience rather than urgency. Abbott uses quietness as a tool. Pauses between lines and long takes allow unease to bloom naturally. The early scenes in the levelist compound reveal his preference for static compositions, where characters are arranged like pieces in a living installation. Rather than moving the camera frequently, he lets stillness convey power dynamics. When Alfred Moretti enters the frame, the camera often lingers on him slightly longer than necessary, forcing the viewer to share the discomfort of the other characters. This deliberate control of timing and perspective defines Abbott's directorial personality throughout the film. His use of long tracking shots is particularly notable. Rather than employing them for showy technical display, he uses them to maintain psychological continuity. A standout example occurs during the dinner sequence in the first act, where the camera circles the table slowly as the conversation devolves into subtle tension. The continuous motion mimics the suffocating repetition of Moretti's monologues and the sense that no one in the room can truly escape. Similarly, the hallway scenes following Ariel's exploration of the compound are constructed with extended takes that emphasize her isolation. The absence of quick cuts allows dread to accumulate gradually, turning simple movements, walking, pausing, looking, into moments of suspense. Abbott understands that fear often arises not from what is seen but from what is prolonged. Visually, Abbott collaborates closely with cinematographer Ari Wegner to create a world that feels both immaculate and decaying. The framing often centers characters against sharp geometric backgrounds, reinforcing themes of control and entrapment. The color palette is dominated by muted whites, grays, and pale blues, suggesting sterility and emotional detachment. However, Abbott strategically introduces bursts of color, like the crimson curtain in the final act, to punctuate moments of revelation or moral rupture. His use of lighting is equally precise. Many scenes are lit to resemble art installations, with harsh spotlights isolating faces and bodies. This technique mirrors the film's exploration of performance and observation, turning characters into subjects of both art and surveillance. One of Abbott's strongest directorial instincts lies in his work with actors. He guides performances toward understatement rather than theatricality, trusting the camera to capture micro-expressions that convey conflict more effectively than overt gestures. Ayo Edebiri's restrained physicality as Ariel and John Malkovich's composed menace as Moretti both benefit from this approach. Abbott often stages dialogue scenes in symmetrical compositions, keeping the camera fixed as the emotional temperature shifts between the two. His insistence on subtlety invites viewers to search for meaning in tone, silence, and posture. Even when the script veers into philosophical abstraction, Abbott's direction keeps the performances grounded in believable human behavior. Pacing is where Abbott takes the biggest creative risk. The film moves slowly, with sequences that linger well past traditional narrative beats. Some viewers may find the deliberate tempo challenging, but the slowness serves a thematic function. It mirrors the process of manipulation that defines the story, gradual, repetitive, and insidious. When the tension finally breaks in the final act, the impact feels earned precisely because of the preceding restraint. Abbott resists the temptation to accelerate toward a climax. Instead, he allows the film's atmosphere to deteriorate naturally, creating a sense of psychological erosion. Abbott's stylistic choices extend to sound design and editing. He frequently employs abrupt sound cuts that interrupt emotional flow, forcing the audience to recalibrate. For instance, the transition from a heated debate to total silence in the next scene creates a jarring sense of emptiness. His editing avoids conventional continuity, often cutting mid-sentence or shifting angles to disorient the viewer. These techniques reinforce the theme of broken perception and artistic control. The score, composed by Micah Levi, is used sparingly under Abbott's direction. Instead of constant musical accompaniment, he favors ambient hums, mechanical noises, and the occasional discordant string note that emerges like a disturbance in consciousness. However, not all of Abbott's decisions land flawlessly. A few moments, particularly in the film's final stretch, suffer from overindulgence in visual metaphor. The sequence in which Ariel wanders through a mirrored installation feels heavy-handed, spelling out ideas the audience has already absorbed. Likewise, some of the slow-motion inserts disrupt rather than enhance the narrative rhythm. Yet even these missteps reveal Abbott's ambition to treat the film as a living piece of art rather than a simple thriller. What ultimately defines his direction in Opus 2025 is control. Control over space, emotion, and perception. Every camera movement, every silence, every compositional choice reflects a director who wants the audience to feel both trapped and complicit. Abbott transforms the act of watching into a form of participation, blurring the line between viewer and subject. His vision ensures that Opus 2025 is not merely a story about manipulation but an experience that enacts it. Through disciplined pacing, calculated visual design, and a deep trust in his actors, Abbott crafts a film where the direction itself becomes the narrative's moral center, a study in how artistry and control can both illuminate and corrupt. The cinematography of Opus 2025, crafted by Ari Wegner, is one of the film's defining achievements, shaping its identity as both a psychological thriller and an introspective study of control, art, and confinement. Wegner's work is not simply decorative, it's deeply narrative, reflecting the emotional disintegration of the characters through visual rhythm, lighting, and framing. Every shot in Opus 2025 feels deliberate, as though designed to trap the audience within the same sterile, carefully constructed world that confines the characters. Wegner's camera doesn't just observe, it implicates, inviting viewers to question whether they are witnessing art being created or people being consumed by it. From the opening sequence, the cinematography establishes a sense of spatial and emotional claustrophobia. The first images of the film are dominated by clean architectural lines, sharp contrasts, and vast empty rooms illuminated by cold, diffused light. Wegner uses wide shots to emphasize isolation, positioning characters against minimalist backdrops that dwarf them. This visual strategy reflects the thematic core of Opus 2025, how control and artistic ambition reduce individuality to geometry. The starkness of the environment creates a detached atmosphere, almost clinical, which gradually gives way to deeper shadows and warmer tones as the psychological tension builds. The transition in lighting mirrors the character's descent from professional detachment into emotional exposure. Wegner's control of framing is one of the film's strongest storytelling tools. In early scenes, the camera often maintains symmetrical compositions, centering the characters within rigid architectural forms. This symmetry conveys order and restraint, echoing Alfred Moretti's obsession with control over his environment and the people within it. As the story unfolds, the compositions begin to break down. The framing becomes off-center, mirrors distort reflections, and depth of field narrows to isolate characters within fragments of the frame. These visual shifts subtly communicate the loss of stability and the growing tension between perception and reality. In a film so concerned with observation and manipulation, the camera itself becomes a participant, a silent enforcer of Moretti's worldview. Camera movement in Opus 2025 is minimal yet meaningful. Wegner avoids handheld spontaneity, opting instead for slow, deliberate tracking shots and static long takes that heighten unease. The camera glides with mechanical precision, echoing the meticulous control that defines Moretti's art installation. When movement does occur, it feels significant, a quiet intrusion into the stillness. One memorable example is a tracking shot that follows Ariel through a corridor lined with white panels, her reflection bouncing from mirrored surfaces as she walks. The movement feels hypnotic, but the reflections distort her figure until she appears multiplied and fragmented. This visual metaphor for identity and performance encapsulates the film's central tension between authenticity and artifice. Lighting plays a critical role in building the film's psychological landscape. Wegner employs a combination of naturalistic and stylized lighting, allowing the film to oscillate between realism and surrealism. Early scenes use soft daylight filtered through frosted glass, creating a diffused glow that conveys calm detachment. As the story progresses, the lighting grows harsher and more directional. Shadows stretch across faces, isolating eyes or mouths while concealing everything else. In key moments, Wegner uses chiaroscuro contrasts, deep blacks against surgical whites, to externalize moral and emotional conflict. The shift from open, evenly lit spaces to tightly lit interiors mirrors Ariel's transformation from observer to subject. The final act's use of flickering artificial light amplifies the sense of instability, suggesting that both the characters and the environment have lost coherence. Color design is another layer of Wegner's storytelling. The film begins with a palette dominated by whites, silvers, and muted grays, evoking sterility and intellectual control. These colors make the environment feel both pristine and oppressive. As the film advances, warmer hues slowly intrude, yellows and reds seep into the imagery during emotionally charged scenes. The introduction of red, in particular, is used sparingly but powerfully. A single red element, like the drape in the climactic confrontation, becomes a visual rupture, a reminder of passion, danger, and the intrusion of raw humanity into an otherwise controlled space. The progression of color throughout Opus 2025 effectively charts the emotional arc of the narrative, transforming the sterile into the chaotic. One of Wegner's most impressive choices is the use of negative space to express power dynamics. In scenes between Moretti and Ariel, the distance between them in the frame often tells more than their dialogue. When Moretti dominates the conversation, the camera places him in the foreground, towering over Ariel's blurred profile. When Ariel begins asserting herself, the framing reverses, placing her sharply in focus while Moretti recedes into the shadows. This subtle manipulation of perspective visualizes the shifting psychological control without a single line of exposition. The audience senses the transformation instinctively, through visual design rather than narrative declaration. Wegner's cinematography also finds poetry in stillness. Some of the most haunting images in the film come from moments where the camera refuses to move. A static shot of Ariel sitting alone in the performance space, surrounded by harsh light, carries as much emotional weight as the film's more dynamic scenes. The stillness forces viewers to engage with the tension in her posture, the emptiness of the frame, and the silence that fills the air. By embracing stillness, Wegner gives space for reflection, aligning the film's visual form with its philosophical themes about art, perception, and control. In the climactic scenes, Wegner's visual choices become increasingly abstract. Reflections multiply, light sources shift unpredictably, and spatial orientation becomes uncertain. The audience loses the ability to distinguish between what is part of the installation and what is real. This visual disorientation serves the narrative purpose of blurring boundaries between artist and subject, between creation and destruction. The cinematography in these final moments feels like a visual manifestation of madness. Symmetrical forms collapse, and the clean geometry of earlier scenes dissolves into chaos. Ultimately, the cinematography of Opus 2025 is essential, not ornamental. Wegner's work captures the tension between structure and emotion, intellect and vulnerability, control and surrender. Every frame contributes to the psychological unease that defines the film. The combination of minimal movement, carefully managed light, and evolving color turns the visual design into an extension of the story's themes. Long after the film ends, the images remain, Ariel's reflection fracturing across glass, the sterile whiteness of the compound giving way to crimson, and the final lingering shot that holds just long enough for the audience to feel complicit in what they've witnessed. Through its cinematography, Opus 2025 transforms observation into participation, ensuring that the act of seeing is as haunting as the story itself. The editing and pacing of Opus 2025 are integral to its hypnotic tension, functioning as both a narrative structure and an emotional instrument. Edited by Jennifer Lame, the film's rhythm is defined by restraint rather than speed, by precision rather than flourish. Lame's editorial design is meticulous, building tension not through constant movement but through what she withholds, pauses, silences, and the lingering discomfort of scenes that stretch a few beats too long. The result is a film that feels immersive, disquieting, and deliberate in every temporal decision. Opus 2025 uses editing as a language of psychological control, mirroring its central themes of manipulation and performance. From its opening sequence, the pacing establishes itself as deliberate. The first act unfolds with extended takes and minimal cutting, immersing the viewer in the cold precision of the levelist compound. Each edit arrives with purpose, guided by rhythm rather than continuity. The film opens with slow cross-dissolves between wide, static compositions, spaces rather than actions, immediately signaling that this story will move at the pace of observation, not reaction. Lame's choice to linger on empty rooms before introducing characters builds anticipation, emphasizing environment as a psychological force. When Alfred Moretti and Ariel first appear, the editing mirrors the dynamic between them. Moretti's scenes are cut with rigid continuity, reflecting control and order, while Ariel's perspective is introduced with fragmented, overlapping cuts that reveal her growing unease. Lame's sense of rhythm becomes more experimental as the narrative deepens. She uses pacing as a psychological indicator. When tension is suppressed, scenes breathe. When tension erupts, edits fracture. Rather than traditional fast cutting, Lame employs elliptical editing and temporal dislocation. Moments jump ahead without visual cues, creating uncertainty about how much time has passed. This manipulation of duration gives the viewer the same sense of temporal distortion the characters experience. For example, during Ariel's late-night exploration of the studio, time appears to fold. Cuts between corridors, reflections, and close-ups of her eyes fragment continuity, as if we are witnessing perception rather than objective movement. These sequences demonstrate how Lame's editing is narrative, emotional, and psychological all at once. Transitions in Opus 2025 are intentionally smooth on the surface but often disorienting in context. Lame avoids conventional fade-outs or musical bridges, preferring hard cuts that juxtapose stillness with movement or sound with silence. The film's editing style trusts the audience to adapt without explicit signposts. One striking transition occurs midway through the film, when Ariel's hesitant gaze at a performance rehearsal cuts directly to a shot of her isolated in her own private recording session. The cut is seamless visually but jarring emotionally, compressing what could be days of development into a single conceptual leap. This type of temporal compression allows the film to maintain its slow rhythm without sacrificing narrative progression. Montage is used sparingly but meaningfully. When montage appears, it's not to accelerate time but to reflect psychological fragmentation. A brief montage of preparation scenes, lighting adjustments, camera calibrations, and performance rehearsals appears midway through the film. Rather than flowing with energy, it feels sterile and repetitive, underlining the monotony and control of Moretti's world. Each repetition of sound and image becomes oppressive, transforming what could be a dynamic creative process into a cycle of submission. Lame's editing choices reinforce the emotional reality of the film rather than its logistical one. Cross-cutting also plays a subtle but powerful role. Lame weaves parallel actions to build tension, not through external threat but through internal unease. A standout example occurs near the climax, as Moretti performs his final monologue while Ariel moves through the compound in near darkness. The cross-cutting rhythm grows increasingly irregular. Long pauses on Ariel's cautious steps, sudden hard cuts back to Moretti's speech. This inconsistent rhythm creates unease by violating our expectations of cinematic flow. Each cut feels like an interruption rather than a continuation, echoing the psychological rupture occurring between the characters. The pacing across the film's 3 acts reflects a carefully engineered arc. The first act is measured, almost clinical, dominated by observation. The second act stretches tension, holding shots longer than necessary to evoke discomfort and anticipation. By the final act, the rhythm tightens, cuts arrive closer together, visual motifs overlap, and dialogue begins to collide. However, even in its climax, the film never descends into chaos. Lame maintains compositional discipline, ensuring every cut feels motivated by character psychology. The pacing allows intensity to emerge organically rather than through external spectacle. Lame's editing also trusts silence as an active element. Many key moments are defined by what isn't heard. Instead of music-driven transitions, silence extends across scenes, forcing the viewer to dwell in stillness. The absence of sound often amplifies emotional impact more than any score could. A particularly effective example is the sequence following the first major confrontation between Ariel and Moretti. The argument cuts abruptly to a silent shot of Ariel staring at a flickering light. The lack of audio not only emphasizes isolation but also creates a temporal pause, a breath that feels heavy, unresolved, and necessary. This restraint defines Lame's editorial signature throughout the film. While much of the editing is masterful, there are moments where the pacing risks alienating impatient viewers. A few sequences, particularly in the second act, hold their tension a fraction too long. The repetition of similar visual patterns, static shots of corridors or slow pans across minimal spaces, could have benefited from slight tightening to preserve momentum. Yet, these moments also contribute to the film's meditative tone, reinforcing its identity as psychological cinema rather than conventional thriller. The climax showcases Lame's best work. As the film reaches its emotional peak, the editing begins to collapse structure intentionally. Quick flashes of earlier scenes intercut with new imagery, creating a non-linear feedback loop that blurs memory and present experience. This approach transforms the editing into a mirror of consciousness, fragmented, cyclical, and unstable. By the time the final image arrives, a static, silent shot that lingers several seconds longer than expected, the viewer is both relieved and unsettled. Ultimately, the editing and pacing of Opus 2025 are acts of authorship. Jennifer Lame doesn't just assemble footage, she sculpts emotion and perception. Her timing controls how long the audience can breathe, how long they can bear discomfort, and when release finally arrives. The slow tempo, minimal transitions, and psychological rhythm define the film's identity as an exercise in restraint and tension. Through its editing, Opus 2025 becomes not a story told in time but a meditation on time itself, how it stretches, folds, and fractures under the pressure of control. The soundtrack and score of Opus 2025 serve as a psychological undercurrent, guiding emotion and shaping tension as much as the visuals or dialogue. Composed by Micah Levi, the score operates less as background accompaniment and more as an invisible presence, something that seems to exist within the walls of the levelist compound as much as inside the characters' minds. Levi's work here is not conventionally melodic or cinematic. Instead, it's textural, abstract, and deeply unsettling. Every note, drone, or moment of silence feels carefully placed to sustain the film's atmosphere of control and emotional unease. The result is a soundscape that doesn't just support the story but becomes its emotional architecture. Levi begins the score with restraint, using sounds sparingly during the film's early scenes. The opening credits are almost silent, filled only with faint ambient noise that might be the hum of fluorescent lights or the distant movement of machinery. This choice immediately situates the viewer in a world where sound itself feels artificial and constructed. When the first musical cue does arrive, barely audible low-frequency strings beneath the scene introducing Alfred Moretti, it feels like a subtle shift in air pressure rather than a cue for emotion. This approach establishes one of Levi's recurring techniques throughout Opus 2025, music as tension disguised as texture. The score doesn't tell you what to feel, it makes you feel what the characters can't articulate. One of the defining characteristics of Levi's composition is her use of recurring motifs that attach to psychological rather than narrative triggers. For instance, a faint three-note motif, played on detuned piano, recurs whenever Ariel confronts questions of authorship or identity. The motif never resolves, leaving the listener uneasy, mirroring her inability to reconcile her role in Moretti's project. Another recurring sound is a low, vibrating hum associated with the levelist compound itself, as if the building has a pulse. Levi blends these motifs so seamlessly into the film's sound design that it becomes difficult to separate diegetic from non-diegetic sound. At times, what begins as mechanical hum transforms into musical tone, and what starts as melody collapses into static. This blurring reinforces the film's central question about art and reality, where creation ends and control begins. The middle act of the film sees Levi's score take on a more intrusive presence, though still avoiding traditional orchestral cues. During the rehearsal sequences, she layers electronic textures with organic sounds, bowed metal, reversed strings, and the rhythmic clicking of projectors. The soundscape becomes percussive without rhythm, generating unease through irregularity. In one particularly striking moment, Ariel practices her movements under a flickering spotlight while Levi's score syncs to the flicker rate, creating a stuttering pulse that borders on unbearable. It's an example of how the score manipulates sensory experience, aligning the audience's physiological discomfort with Ariel's psychological state. Levi also understands the power of silence, using it as a counterpoint to her music. Silence in Opus 2025 is rarely peaceful. It's a vacuum that magnifies vulnerability. After the first major argument between Ariel and Moretti, the music drops out entirely for nearly 3 minutes. The absence of sound feels louder than any score could. You begin to notice the ambient noises of the space, the distant footsteps, the subtle echo of breathing, the crackle of lights. This attention to the negative space of sound is what gives Levi's work its potency. Silence becomes emotional punctuation, defining the rhythm of tension and release. At key points, Levi introduces subtle fragments of melody that pierce the film's minimalism. One of the most memorable cues occurs in the second act, when Ariel begins to rebel against Moretti's instructions. A fragile string progression begins quietly, almost imperceptible beneath dialogue, then swells as her confidence builds. The progression never reaches full resolution, it fades mid-phrase, leaving a sense of incompletion. This musical decision mirrors the thematic incompleteness of Ariel's empowerment. The score supports character development through restraint rather than declaration. Levi's collaboration with the film's sound designers also enhances the illusion that music and diegetic sound share the same emotional space. Everyday noises, door hinges, distant typing, electrical hum, are often pitched or processed to blend seamlessly with the score. This integration creates a sonic world that feels alive, breathing, and unstable. In one haunting moment, the sound of a light switch merges with a rising string tone so precisely that it's unclear when one ends and the other begins. This synthesis between score and environment reinforces the idea that control extends beyond the characters to the world itself. Licensed music appears only twice in the film, both times used to devastating effect. The first is during a rehearsal scene where Moretti plays an old vinyl record of an opera aria. The lushness of the human voice contrasts sharply with the sterile electronic score, creating a momentary illusion of warmth and emotion. Yet as the record skips and repeats the same line over and over, the scene turns oppressive again. The repetition transforms beauty into control, art into confinement. The second use of licensed music arrives near the end, when Ariel reclaims the performance space after the climax. A minimalist piano piece plays, clear and emotionally open, suggesting liberation. It's the only unprocessed, purely acoustic music in the film, symbolizing a brief moment of authenticity. Levi's score also demonstrates remarkable sensitivity to pacing. Instead of dictating rhythm, it often lags behind or precedes visual action, creating tension between sight and sound. In one sequence, the music continues for several seconds after a scene cuts to black, disorienting the viewer's sense of continuity. In another, the score fades out just before a shocking visual reveal, leaving the silence to carry the emotional impact. These temporal mismatches make the audience hyper-aware of time, echoing the film's themes of perception and control. Despite its brilliance, the score occasionally risks over-intellectualization. A few sequences, particularly the final performance montage, lean heavily into dissonant textures that border on sensory fatigue. While the intent is clear, the prolonged abstraction momentarily distances the viewer emotionally. Still, these moments are rare and forgivable in the context of Levi's daring experimentation. Ultimately, the soundtrack and score of Opus 2025 are not just aesthetic choices, they are storytelling devices. Micah Levi's minimalist yet emotionally charged composition transforms the film into a sonic experience as much as a visual one. Her use of recurring motifs, manipulated silence, and environmental soundscapes builds a world where every tone carries meaning. The result is a sound design that doesn't merely underscore the narrative but deepens it, inviting the audience to listen as carefully as they watch. Long after the film ends, echoes of its haunting motifs linger, as if the sound itself refuses to be forgotten, a fitting reflection of a film that blurs art and emotion until they are indistinguishable. At its core, Opus 2025 is a psychological exploration of control, authorship, and identity. How art can both liberate and imprison those who create it, and how power disguised as mentorship can blur the line between inspiration and manipulation. Beneath its minimalist surface, the film is a meditation on what it means to lose yourself inside your own creation, questioning whether art is an act of self-expression or self-erasure. Director Christopher Abbott and writer Thomas Mullen build the story not around external conflict but around the slow corrosion of personal autonomy, using the relationship between Alfred Moretti and Ariel Marx as a reflection of the broader struggle between authority and individuality. One of the film's most dominant themes is control, creative, emotional, and psychological. Moretti, the veteran artist, believes mastery comes from absolute domination over his environment, his collaborators, and his audience. His art installations rely on precision and obedience, reflecting his obsession with order. Ariel, the younger performance artist, enters his world seeking mentorship but quickly becomes part of his system of control. Every choice she makes, what she says, how she moves, even how she breathes, is guided by Moretti's direction. The film uses visual and narrative cues to reinforce this power imbalance. Rooms framed symmetrically, dialogue interrupted by long silences, and moments where Ariel's reflection appears fragmented in mirrors. Through these choices, the film communicates its theme of creative oppression without relying on exposition. The viewer feels the suffocating pressure of perfectionism not through words but through rhythm and imagery. Identity and authorship are intertwined throughout Opus 2025. The film poses a haunting question: who owns a performance, the artist who conceives it or the one who embodies it? Ariel's struggle to define herself becomes the emotional spine of the story. As she immerses deeper into Moretti's project, her individuality begins to dissolve. The score mirrors this through recurring motifs that merge her perspective with his, suggesting that creative collaboration can easily slip into psychological consumption. In one of the film's most striking sequences, Ariel performs a movement routine that she believes expresses her emotions, only to realize that every gesture was anticipated, rehearsed, and manipulated by Moretti. This moment encapsulates the film's central paradox: creation as both liberation and imprisonment. By the time she finally rebels, the audience understands that reclaiming authorship comes at the cost of destroying what has been created. Another key theme is performance itself, not just in the artistic sense, but in the way people perform identities for approval, survival, or dominance. Every interaction in Opus 2025 feels like a stage act, with power shifting based on who controls the scene. The compound's minimalist architecture becomes a metaphor for a theater stripped of illusion, exposing the raw mechanics of manipulation. The film blurs boundaries between reality and rehearsal, suggesting that authenticity may be an illusion in a world governed by observation. Even the camera participates in this idea, often framing characters through glass panels or surveillance-style angles, reminding viewers that every moment of vulnerability is still a performance for someone watching. Power dynamics extend beyond art into moral and emotional territory. Moretti represents institutional power, the gatekeeper who defines what is valuable and what isn't. Ariel represents the next generation, questioning the old structures but still entangled in their rules. The film critiques the toxic dynamics of artistic mentorship, showing how authority can masquerade as enlightenment while feeding off dependency. Yet it avoids easy moral binaries. Moretti's need for control is rooted in fear of irrelevance, of losing mastery, of being forgotten. Ariel's rebellion is fueled by both empowerment and ego, blurring the line between justice and self-preservation. The complexity of these motivations gives the film its emotional depth, refusing to reduce its themes to simple morality tales. A subtler theme running through Opus 2025 is the relationship between art and truth. The film repeatedly asks whether truth can exist in artifice. Moretti claims that true art emerges from precision and control, while Ariel insists that authenticity lies in imperfection and chaos. Their conflict mirrors an ongoing cultural debate between structure and spontaneity, between the classical and the modern. The film's visual language supports this argument. Early scenes are symmetrical and rigid, later ones become fractured and unpredictable. This shift in composition reflects a thematic evolution. The breakdown of control gives birth to a new, messier kind of truth. The theme of fear also plays a crucial role. Beneath the intellectual debates, Opus 2025 is about the fear of disappearance, of losing identity, influence, or purpose. For Moretti, fear drives his obsession with permanence. For Ariel, it drives her desire to define herself apart from him. The compound itself seems built on this anxiety. Every wall, light, and sound feels engineered to suppress uncertainty. Yet the film suggests that fear and creation are inseparable, that to make something meaningful, one must confront the loss embedded within it. This emotional tension is what gives Opus 2025 its haunting power. Love, in the film's universe, is another form of control. Moretti's affection for Ariel is possessive, an extension of his artistic domination. Ariel's admiration for him evolves into resentment and self-assertion. Their relationship becomes a tragic reflection of how intimacy can blur into dependency. The film avoids romanticizing their connection, instead treating it as a study in how creative partnerships can breed emotional distortion. Ultimately, the message of Opus 2025 lies in the collision between creation and autonomy. The film suggests that art is both an act of expression and a form of entrapment. True artistry, it argues, demands surrender, but surrender too much, and you lose yourself. In the final act, when Ariel destroys the installation that defined her and Moretti's partnership, the act reads as both rebellion and purification. The film leaves viewers questioning whether liberation is possible without destruction, whether creation without control is even art at all. Opus 2025 doesn't deliver its themes through dialogue-heavy explanation but through sensory design, through silence, symmetry, rhythm, and dissonance. It invites interpretation rather than declaring meaning. That ambiguity is what makes it resonate. For American audiences used to clarity and closure, its refusal to simplify might frustrate, but it also elevates the film into a piece of art about the very act of meaning-making. Opus 2025 ultimately wrestles with one truth. Creation demands sacrifice, and sometimes the self is the price. Opus 2025 is not a film that leans heavily on spectacle-driven visual effects, but rather one that integrates them subtly and purposefully into its psychological framework. The use of CGI and digital enhancement in the movie is designed to deepen the emotional and thematic undercurrents rather than call attention to itself. The film's world, a sleek, sterile art compound where creativity is both born and confined, relies on a careful balance between tangible, practical environments and digital augmentation. The VFX team, led by Framestore and supported by independent post-production houses, approaches the technology as a storytelling tool, using invisible effects to manipulate perception, mood, and realism. This creates an atmosphere that feels grounded yet slightly off, reflecting the internal disorientation of its characters. From its opening moments, Opus 2025 establishes a visual identity rooted in digital precision. The compound's architecture is rendered with subtle CGI extensions, walls that appear to shift imperceptibly, corridors that seem to elongate, and glass panels that reflect impossible angles. These effects are executed with restraint, never breaking the illusion of reality but enhancing the sense of psychological distortion. The result is a space that feels both real and uncanny, mirroring the tension between control and chaos that defines Alfred Moretti's artistic philosophy. Viewers may not consciously register these manipulations, but they feel them. The geometry of the environment becomes a visual metaphor for the character's mental confinement. One of the film's standout achievements in visual effects lies in its depiction of performance art sequences. When Ariel begins rehearsing under Moretti's direction, motion-tracked camera work and composited light overlays subtly alter her form in real time. Her movements are mirrored by faint afterimages, digital echoes that trail her body, suggesting repetition, control, and erasure. This effect, created through layered compositing and rotoscoping, feels almost supernatural yet entirely grounded in artistic logic. The audience witnesses the blending of human expression with machine precision, reinforcing the theme of identity dissolution. These sequences demonstrate how Opus 2025 uses VFX not as ornamentation but as psychological punctuation. The film's most visually elaborate moment arrives during the final installation performance, a sequence that merges live performance, projection mapping, and digital compositing. Ariel performs inside a mirrored cube where her image multiplies infinitely across surfaces. Each reflection is manipulated in real time, breaking apart into data-like fragments as her emotional state deteriorates. This moment required heavy digital rendering and motion tracking, but the compositing is so seamless that it feels organic. The reflections act as narrative agents, revealing the fragmentation of self that the entire film has been building toward. The sequence balances technical brilliance with emotional clarity, never letting the visual flourish overshadow the story. In contrast to these digital layers, Opus 2025 also uses practical effects and minimalism to anchor its realism. Practical lighting and in-camera lens effects often blend with digital enhancements, creating a hybrid aesthetic that resists classification. For example, the shifting shadows in Moretti's private studio, suggesting surveillance or unseen presence, are achieved through programmable LED panels combined with subtle digital extensions. This mix gives the illusion that the environment itself is alive, a sentient participant in the creative process. It's an approach reminiscent of films like Ex Machina and Under the Skin, where VFX is used not to overwhelm but to haunt. The film's use of CGI also extends into its manipulation of time and perception. In several sequences, the camera lingers in slow motion while the surrounding environment subtly glitches, bending spatial continuity. These digital distortions visualize Ariel's psychological unraveling, turning her subjective state into visual language. Instead of traditional dream sequences, Opus 2025 opts for micro-moments of reality slippage, barely perceptible warps in texture, frame rate, or perspective that make the viewer question what is real. The precision of this digital work gives the film its eerie stillness. It's not the kind of CGI that calls for attention but the kind that quietly rewires your sense of space. There are, however, moments where the digital touch slightly overextends. A few transitions between sequences rely on symbolic visual metaphors, such as dissolving the human form into digital dust or projecting the compound's blueprint onto the sky, that, while beautiful, risk feeling overly designed. These choices, though thematically aligned, occasionally interrupt the film's otherwise disciplined realism. Still, such moments are rare and arguably forgivable, as they reinforce the central motif of creation dissolving into abstraction. What sets Opus 2025 apart from most films in its category is the way its effects design aligns with its philosophical message. The digital world here is not futuristic or fantastical, it is introspective. The CGI mirrors psychological landscapes rather than external spectacle. The blending of analog and digital techniques serves to question the boundary between human and machine creativity. The way Ariel's movements are occasionally synchronized with projection overlays hints at the mechanization of expression, turning her into both artist and artwork. This use of technology becomes a critique of modern creative industries themselves, where innovation often demands emotional sacrifice. The color grading also deserves mention as an extension of digital artistry. The VFX pipeline integrates with the film's desaturated palette, shifting from icy grays to warmer tones as control gives way to chaos. These subtle digital manipulations of tone and saturation provide emotional cues that shape the audience's subconscious response. By the finale, the screen is drenched in fluctuating light patterns, digitally enhanced to suggest both disintegration and rebirth. For American audiences accustomed to spectacle-heavy CGI, Opus 2025 offers a masterclass in restraint. Its digital effects are invisible servants to storytelling, enhancing the thematic weight without overwhelming the viewer. The film's technical craftsmanship stands out precisely because it does not announce itself. It demonstrates how modern visual effects can be redefined, not as spectacle but as psychology. The seamless fusion of digital and practical design transforms Opus 2025 into an immersive sensory experience, one where the effects themselves become part of the film's emotional architecture. By the time the credits roll, the viewer is left with the impression that technology, like art, is both a mirror and a mask, a reflection of the human need to create, control, and transcend. The set design and locations in Opus 2025 are integral to how the film establishes its identity. Every environment in the movie feels carefully constructed to reflect not just where the story takes place, but what the characters are experiencing internally. The production design, led by Simon Wakefield, achieves a delicate balance between realism and psychological stylization, allowing the world of Opus 2025 to exist in a space that feels simultaneously tangible and otherworldly. Each location becomes a mirror of the emotional and thematic state of the story, with meticulous attention to texture, geometry, and spatial composition. The film's opening act takes place in Ariel Ecton's small city apartment, a compact, lived-in space that communicates her life before she enters the strange world of Alfred Moretti. The apartment is filled with mismatched furniture, overstuffed bookshelves, and stacks of old magazines, reflecting a character who lives more in her work than in her surroundings. The color palette leans toward muted earth tones, punctuated by the cold glow of her laptop and a flickering desk lamp. Small details like audio recording equipment, pinned notes, and unfinished coffee cups reinforce her obsessive personality and professional frustration. This space feels authentic and grounded, anchoring the viewer in a world that is recognizably human before the film transitions into the surreal. Once Ariel travels to Moretti's compound, the visual tone shifts dramatically. The location, an isolated estate on a fog-shrouded coastline, immediately conveys wealth, mystery, and unease. The exterior shots were filmed at a real modernist structure in Iceland, digitally extended to emphasize isolation. The production team used the building's sharp geometry and reflective surfaces to create a space that feels like a museum of minimalism. Inside, the design philosophy becomes colder and more symbolic. Long corridors of polished concrete, glass walls, and monochrome rooms dominate the frame. Everything feels symmetrical and precise, as though built by a mind obsessed with order. The compound's design perfectly mirrors Moretti's character, controlled, artificial, and emotionally sterile. Every room within the compound serves a narrative purpose. The guest quarters, for example, feature no personal decorations or warmth, only neutral furnishings, hidden surveillance cameras, and carefully calibrated lighting that mimics natural sunlight. The effect is unsettling, suggesting comfort without humanity. The performance hall, one of the film's visual highlights, is an architectural marvel of design. Its structure resembles a cross between a cathedral and a sound chamber, with curving white walls and subtle acoustic textures that amplify every sound. This space becomes central to the film's psychological tension, serving as both a stage and a prison. The audience feels the weight of the design, the way architecture becomes an instrument of manipulation. Props play an equally vital role in defining this world. Moretti's compound is filled with objects that appear functional but are loaded with symbolic meaning. The Opus audio devices, sleek black cubes that emit strange tones, represent his attempt to turn art into control. The use of these props throughout the film reinforces the idea that creativity has been commodified and weaponized. Similarly, the compound's soundproof rooms are designed with padded textures and hidden speakers, turning design elements into metaphors for silence and obedience. The production team's attention to tactile detail makes every space feel like it has a purpose beyond aesthetics. The choice to contrast real-world imperfection with artificial perfection enhances the story's emotional power. Ariel's early world is cramped, cluttered, and alive. Moretti's world is clean, symmetrical, and suffocating. This duality drives the film's visual identity. The production design uses architecture and space to externalize internal states, Ariel's curiosity colliding with Moretti's obsession. Even small decorative details, like the absence of mirrors in the compound or the repetition of circular patterns in the flooring, subtly reinforce the film's themes of identity and repetition. The outdoor locations are equally important. The coastal cliffs surrounding the compound create a natural barrier that enhances the sense of entrapment. The gray-blue seascapes, often shrouded in mist, serve as visual metaphors for emotional uncertainty. Filmed during overcast conditions, these landscapes feel timeless and alien, contributing to the overall tone of existential isolation. In contrast, when Ariel escapes toward the end, the natural light finally breaks through, providing a rare visual warmth that signifies emotional release. The interplay between natural and constructed environments mirrors the battle between authenticity and artificiality at the heart of the film. Even in smaller set pieces, the attention to realism is evident. The underground recording rooms, where Ariel uncovers the darker truth of the Opus project, combine practical design with subtle digital enhancements. The walls are lined with analog soundboards, tangled cables, and decaying equipment, a deliberate contrast to the pristine surfaces above. The tactile realism of these sets makes the horror of the discovery more immediate and believable. The shift from sterile modernism to industrial decay reflects the collapse of Moretti's illusion of control. Lighting also plays a key role in how these spaces are perceived. Production designer Simon Wakefield collaborated closely with cinematographer Janusz Kaminski to ensure that every light source felt motivated by the environment. In the compound, illumination is built into the architecture, recessed strips of white LED hidden behind panels, casting cold glows that emphasize emptiness. In Ariel's apartment, light is messy and human, with warm lamps and uneven shadows. This careful contrast between natural and artificial illumination gives the film its psychological texture. For American audiences accustomed to large-scale, location-driven filmmaking, Opus 2025 offers a refreshing example of how production design can serve story rather than spectacle. Every element, the architecture, the furniture, the props, contributes to the emotional rhythm of the film. The compound doesn't just exist as a backdrop, it becomes a character in itself, shaping the actions and emotions of those who inhabit it. In the end, the set design and locations of Opus 2025 articulate the movie's central conflict between creation and control. The spaces are immaculate yet inhuman, elegant yet oppressive. The attention to spatial psychology elevates the film beyond standard thriller aesthetics, transforming architecture into metaphor. By using real-world textures enhanced with minimal digital intervention, the filmmakers achieve a realism that feels unsettlingly perfect. It is this perfection, this illusion of beauty, that makes the world of Opus 2025 so haunting. Every hallway, every surface, every object carries the echo of its creator's obsession, reminding viewers that in this story, the environment is both stage and captor, muse and monster. The dialogue and script of Opus 2025 stand as one of its most deliberate and thought-provoking components. Written by Tamsin Parker, the screenplay balances intellectual depth with restrained emotionality, crafting conversations that feel authentic yet meticulously constructed. The film's language operates on multiple levels. It moves between psychological tension, artistic philosophy, and deeply human vulnerability. Rather than relying on exposition or heavy-handed explanation, Opus 2025 trusts the audience to read between the lines. Its dialogue often carries more meaning in what remains unsaid than in what is spoken aloud, turning silence into an active narrative tool. From the opening act, the tone of the dialogue establishes the film's realism. Ariel Ecton, the protagonist, speaks in clipped, observant sentences that mirror her role as a journalist. Her early exchanges with her editor reveal both her intellectual drive and her social isolation. Simple lines such as, "There's truth in noise if you listen long enough," or "I don't want access, I want honesty," reveal her worldview. She values authenticity in an industry built on manipulation. These early conversations set the foundation for her later moral conflict with Alfred Moretti, whose philosophy centers on control and performance. Parker's script is sharp enough to define each character's psychology without relying on overt characterization. When Ariel arrives at Moretti's compound, the dialogue shifts dramatically in tone and rhythm. The conversations become stylized, almost ritualistic. Moretti's words are measured, polished, and cryptic. His monologues feel rehearsed, echoing the performative nature of his entire persona. At one point, he tells his guests, "The art you make after you surrender is the only art that matters." The line encapsulates his twisted ideology, suggesting that creativity demands submission. His diction is filled with metaphor and provocation, making him sound both seductive and menacing. Parker uses this stylization to build unease. The more beautiful Moretti's words become, the more sinister their implications feel. In contrast, the dialogue among the guests is naturalistic and tense. Casual exchanges at the dinner table reveal growing paranoia beneath polite civility. Lines like, "Are we guests or subjects?" or "I can't tell if he's testing us or filming us," show how the script uses language to heighten psychological instability. These small, nervous conversations function as both character moments and exposition, giving the audience information through tone rather than direct explanation. Parker's restraint in writing these scenes allows tension to build organically. The interplay between dialogue and silence is one of Opus 2025's greatest strengths. Many of the film's most powerful moments occur when the characters stop speaking altogether. Ariel's observation scenes, where she silently records sound, watches Moretti's performances, or listens through walls, carry enormous weight precisely because of their quietness. The script uses pauses and unspoken responses as narrative punctuation, inviting the viewer to interpret subtext. This technique aligns with the film's thematic focus on listening, truth, and manipulation. Silence becomes an instrument of power, especially in scenes where Moretti forces his guests to react without responding. The script's pacing and rhythm mirror the story's structure. Early dialogue is brisk, carrying the energy of investigation and curiosity. Midway through the film, conversations slow and become more fragmented, mirroring the characters' disorientation. By the final act, dialogue becomes sparse and almost philosophical, stripping away ornamentation to reveal the core conflict between creator and subject. This deliberate modulation gives the screenplay a dynamic rhythm that enhances the viewer's emotional experience. Subtext runs deep throughout the film. In a key scene between Ariel and Belle, a staff member at the compound, their brief exchange, "You believe him? I believe what I need to survive," communicates volumes about loyalty, fear, and complicity without overt explanation. Similarly, when Ariel confronts Moretti near the climax and says, "You don't make art, you harvest it," the line lands with devastating precision, summarizing the moral and thematic tension of the entire story. Parker's writing shines most in these moments of distilled meaning, where dialogue functions as both emotion and philosophy. The screenplay also uses repetition effectively. Phrases like "truth through surrender" and "purity of sound" recur throughout the film, taking on new meanings each time. Early on, they sound idealistic. Later, they become sinister mantras. This repetition reinforces the cult-like psychology of Moretti's followers and shows how language itself can be weaponized. The script's linguistic patterns mirror the structure of a musical composition, with motifs and variations that deepen with context. Not every line in Opus 2025 is equally successful, though. There are occasional moments when the dialogue leans too heavily into abstraction, especially during Moretti's philosophical monologues. Lines like, "The soul is just an echo chamber waiting for applause," sound clever but risk pulling viewers out of the moment. These instances, though rare, can feel more like the writer speaking than the character. However, the film's grounded performances and measured pacing usually anchor even the most poetic lines in emotional truth. The screenplay's biggest triumph lies in how it fuses intellectual ideas with emotional resonance. It never treats its audience as passive listeners, it challenges them to engage actively. The characters' words are laced with ambiguity, making each conversation a small battle for dominance or understanding. Parker avoids the trap of over-explaining the film's mystery. Instead, she uses language to invite interpretation, trusting that silence and implication can carry as much narrative weight as dialogue. For American audiences, used to fast-paced thrillers or heavily expository scripts, Opus 2025 offers something refreshingly cerebral. It's a film where words are as dangerous as actions, where a single phrase can destabilize an entire scene. The dialogue is sophisticated but never self-indulgent, precise yet haunting. By the time the story reaches its end, the audience realizes that the entire film has been a dialogue between truth and deception, art and ego, sound and silence. Ultimately, the script of Opus 2025 is an exercise in control, mirroring the very themes it explores. Every word is chosen with purpose, every pause calibrated to reveal emotion or intent. It's a screenplay that values suggestion over declaration, complexity over simplicity. Even its imperfections, the rare overwritten line or overly symbolic exchange, serve to highlight the humanity within its design. In a film so focused on manipulation and authenticity, the dialogue becomes its own experiment in honesty. It asks not just what people say, but why they choose to say it, or not say it at all. Opus 2025 occupies an unusual space in modern cinema, blending psychological thriller, mystery, and art house drama into something that resists easy classification. At its core, it is a psychological thriller with philosophical undertones, a story about obsession, control, and the blurred boundaries between creation and exploitation. Yet it borrows structural and tonal cues from horror, drama, and even science fiction, creating a hybrid that feels both familiar and experimental. The film's genre execution is one of its most distinctive strengths, demonstrating how traditional thriller elements can be reinterpreted through a slow-burn, atmospheric approach aimed at intellect as much as emotion. From its opening act, Opus 2025 signals its identity as a cerebral thriller rather than a conventional suspense film. It uses tension rooted in psychology and social power rather than physical danger. There are no jump scares, no overtly violent scenes, and no supernatural elements. Instead, the horror comes from manipulation, confinement, and moral corruption. The tone recalls films like Ex Machina, The Invitation, and The Lighthouse, works that generate dread through mood and ambiguity. For American audiences accustomed to fast pacing and explosive action, Opus 2025 instead offers unease that builds gradually through quiet menace. This slow, deliberate rhythm allows the tension to creep in unnoticed until it becomes suffocating. The screenplay and direction honor many of the classic beats of a thriller. The isolated setting, the mysterious invitation, the charismatic antagonist, and the gradual unraveling of truth. Each element is executed with precision but given a modern reinterpretation. The compound functions as the archetypal locked room scenario found in traditional suspense stories, but the film reimagines it as a conceptual prison rather than a literal one. The protagonist's investigation follows the familiar path of curiosity leading to revelation, yet the revelation here is psychological rather than physical. Instead of discovering a murderer or conspiracy, Ariel uncovers an ideology, a philosophical horror built on artistic obsession. This inversion of genre expectation gives Opus 2025 its originality. The horror elements in the film are subtle but pervasive. The audience feels dread not because of visible threats but because of atmosphere and implication. The sound design, stark cinematography, and ritualistic dialogue all evoke unease. There is something inherently terrifying about a world where creativity becomes control and art becomes captivity. The film understands that the scariest ideas are not supernatural but human: the corruption of genius, the erasure of individuality, the surrender of self under authority. In this sense, Opus 2025 fits into the tradition of psychological horror that values intellect over spectacle. As a drama, the film succeeds by grounding its tension in emotional and ethical conflict. Ariel's arc, from detached observer to morally engaged survivor, follows the trajectory of a classic dramatic transformation. Her battle is internal as much as external, framed not around physical survival but the preservation of integrity and truth. This dramatic spine allows the film to maintain emotional resonance even during its most abstract or philosophical moments. The relationship between Ariel and Moretti provides the film's central dramatic engine, two opposing forces locked in a struggle for ideological dominance. Their verbal duels replace the physical confrontations typical of more conventional thrillers. Opus 2025 also flirts with science fiction, though not in the technological sense. Its depiction of controlled environments, experimental creativity, and data-driven psychology recalls speculative fiction more than grounded realism. Yet the film avoids futuristic visuals or devices, instead creating a near-present world where technology amplifies isolation rather than progress. This subtle genre blending, thriller psychology, dramatic intensity, and speculative aesthetics, positions the film as a hybrid that challenges categorization. Where the film truly stands out is in its rejection of cliché. There are no formulaic chases, no third-act twists that betray logic, and no romance inserted for emotional convenience. The pacing remains consistent with the film's intellectual tone, and the climax avoids the typical explosive resolution. Instead, the tension resolves through moral revelation and symbolic destruction. The compound's collapse is both literal and metaphorical, the fall of an empire of control. By avoiding standard genre shortcuts, the film risks alienating audiences expecting traditional payoffs but rewards those who appreciate psychological complexity. Thematically, Opus 2025 operates within the tradition of art world thrillers like The Velvet Buzzsaw or Black Swan, but strips away satire and spectacle. It treats the creative process as something sacred yet dangerous. In doing so, it reinvents the mad artist trope. Alfred Moretti is not a caricature of insanity. He is a composed, articulate manipulator who embodies a terrifying belief system. His character reframes artistic obsession not as eccentric genius but as moral decay. This subversion adds depth to the genre, turning a familiar archetype into a reflection of cultural anxieties about fame, control, and authenticity. The film's refusal to spoon-feed its audience is another hallmark of its genre reinvention. Traditional thrillers tend to resolve ambiguity with revelation, but Opus 2025 embraces uncertainty. The final scenes leave open questions about what was real, what was manipulated, and what it means to create under control. This ambiguity aligns it with modern prestige thrillers like Enemy or The Killing of a Sacred Deer, where unease lingers long after the story ends. Such an approach may frustrate viewers seeking closure but enriches those who enjoy interpretive storytelling. Visually and tonally, the film situates itself in the lineage of European psychological cinema while maintaining accessibility for American audiences. Its pacing, minimalism, and philosophical tone might recall arthouse traditions, but its structure, clear protagonist, escalating stakes, climactic confrontation, anchors it firmly within Western narrative conventions. This balance allows it to bridge the gap between art film and genre cinema. For viewers familiar with American thriller expectations, fast editing, visible conflict, and clear resolution, Opus 2025 may feel unconventional. Yet its genre execution is precisely what gives it staying power. By using the tools of the thriller but applying them with restraint and intellect, it elevates the genre into something meditative and emotionally charged. Ultimately, Opus 2025 honors genre tradition while redefining its purpose. It delivers suspense without spectacle, horror without monsters, and drama without sentimentality. Its hybrid form allows it to speak to multiple audiences, those who crave psychological immersion and those who value cinematic experimentation. The film proves that genre, when handled with vision and precision, can transcend formula and become art in itself. For American audiences, it stands as a reminder that tension does not require explosions and that fear can exist in silence, symmetry, and the human need to be understood. Opus 2025 operates on multiple layers, and beneath its psychological thriller surface lies a dense network of social and cultural commentary. The film is not simply about one artist's descent into obsession or one woman's struggle for truth. It is a mirror held up to the creative industries, the commodification of genius, and the modern world's uneasy relationship with control, privacy, and identity. In its quiet, haunting way, the film captures the anxieties of an age obsessed with perfection, performance, and surveillance. For American audiences attuned to issues of artistic freedom, media manipulation, and systemic power, Opus 2025's subtext lands with particular resonance. The film's social critique begins with its portrayal of art as both liberation and imprisonment. The compound where most of the story unfolds is not just a setting, it is a metaphor for the institutionalized control of creativity. Moretti, the enigmatic curator and manipulator, represents the commodification of art, the way talent is harvested, managed, and exploited for prestige and profit. Through him, the film comments on a world where creation is no longer an act of individual expression, but a transaction within systems of influence and branding. Ariel's struggle for autonomy becomes a broader allegory for anyone trying to maintain authenticity within corporate or cultural structures that demand conformity. This theme connects directly to real-world concerns about the power dynamics in creative industries. Opus 2025 mirrors the current discourse around exploitation in entertainment, where creators often lose ownership of their work to powerful producers, institutions, or algorithms. The film's depiction of artistic labor as something monitored, graded, and monetized reflects the broader capitalist machinery that turns even personal expression into data and profit. American audiences, familiar with debates about intellectual property and the gig economy, will recognize the anxiety that runs beneath the surface of every scene, the fear that creativity itself has become another form of labor surveillance. Another significant layer of the film's cultural commentary deals with gender and power. Ariel's relationship with Moretti unfolds as a nuanced critique of patriarchal structures that persist in intellectual and artistic spaces. Moretti's calm authority, his rhetoric of mentorship, and his eventual manipulation of Ariel's autonomy echo real-world dynamics between male power figures and emerging female talent. The film avoids simplifying this into a single message about abuse or exploitation. Instead, it examines the subtle psychological grooming that often accompanies hierarchical systems disguised as opportunity. This complexity gives the story emotional truth, especially for audiences aware of post-Me Too conversations about gendered control in professional environments. Opus 2025 also engages with modern questions about truth, perception, and digital identity. The film's setting, isolated, surveilled, and hyper-curated, feels like a metaphor for life under constant observation. Moretti's compound operates like a closed social media ecosystem, where everything is filtered, documented, and judged. Ariel's gradual awareness that her actions and expressions are being recorded without her full consent draws a parallel to the erosion of privacy in the digital era. The film critiques how data, art, and identity become commodities under systems that promise connection but deliver manipulation. This commentary feels particularly pointed for American audiences navigating a world dominated by algorithms, influence economies, and the pressure to perform authenticity online. Culturally, Opus 2025 reflects a growing skepticism toward institutions that define taste, knowledge, and legitimacy. Moretti's role as an arbiter of artistic value mirrors the elitism often found in academic, artistic, or political circles. His belief that he can curate human experience underlines the arrogance of systems that presume authority over truth or beauty. The film's dismantling of his ideology becomes a broader act of rebellion against institutional control, whether that institution is an art foundation, a government, or a media conglomerate. This defiance resonates in a cultural moment when many Americans question who holds power to define meaning and who benefits from those definitions. The film's political commentary, though subtle, is unmistakable. It critiques authoritarian logic, not through overt political references but through the dynamics of manipulation and submission. The compound structure, where creative individuals are isolated and monitored, mirrors the logic of surveillance capitalism and even authoritarian governance. The illusion of freedom under constant observation reflects the uneasy tension between safety and liberty in contemporary society. While Opus 2025 avoids specific geopolitical references, its world feels shaped by the moral fatigue of the 2020s, an era defined by information overload, institutional distrust, and the commodification of individuality. What makes the film's commentary compelling is its restraint. It does not lecture or moralize, it embeds critique within experience. Viewers feel the weight of systemic control rather than being told about it. Ariel's small acts of resistance, refusing to perform, questioning authority, reclaiming her work, carry political weight precisely because they feel human and grounded. The personal becomes political not through slogans but through emotion and consequence. Still, Opus 2025's social engagement is not without flaws. Some viewers may find its critique too abstract or its characters too symbolic to evoke empathy. The film's intellectual tone risks alienating those who prefer more explicit moral positioning. In certain moments, the script edges toward ambiguity that blurs rather than deepens meaning, especially in its portrayal of Moretti's ideology. By refusing to condemn him outright, the film walks a fine line between nuance and detachment. Yet this ambiguity also reflects the moral complexity of its world, one where power rarely announces itself as evil and manipulation often masquerades as mentorship or genius. The cultural significance of Opus 2025 lies in how it captures the unease of contemporary existence. It is about the loss of agency in systems that promise empowerment, the erosion of truth in spaces built on curation, and the loneliness of being observed but not understood. It resonates in a time when art and identity have become both currency and performance. For American audiences, the film functions as a darkly poetic reflection of their own social landscape, one defined by ambition, surveillance, moral fatigue, and the endless negotiation between self-expression and systemic control. Ultimately, Opus 2025's social and cultural commentary is what elevates it beyond genre. It transforms psychological tension into a critique of modern civilization's obsession with mastery. By exposing the fragile boundary between creation and control, it speaks directly to the cultural moment, a world where every act of expression risks being captured, repackaged, and owned. Its quiet power lies in this realization: the most terrifying prison is not the one we see, but the one we agree to live inside. Audience engagement in Opus 2025 is shaped by a delicate balance of tension, emotion, and mystery. The film does not rely on cheap thrills or shock tactics. Instead, it builds a sustained psychological intensity that keeps viewers leaning forward, analyzing every detail, and questioning every motive. From its opening sequence to the haunting final frame, the movie is designed to provoke discussion, emotional response, and intellectual debate long after the credits roll. It rewards patience, close attention, and emotional investment, making it one of those rare modern thrillers that feels both cinematic and participatory. The opening scene of Opus 2025 immediately commands the audience's attention. It begins with a quiet, almost meditative tone, a long tracking shot through an empty high-tech art compound where light and shadow play across sculptures that seem almost alive. This eerie calm builds curiosity and unease before any dialogue begins. Viewers are drawn in by the precision of the world building. Every frame hints at secrets, creating a visual puzzle that demands engagement. For American audiences used to more direct exposition, this restrained beginning feels fresh and challenging. It asks them to lean in and interpret rather than passively consume. The film's first major gasp-inducing moment comes about 20 minutes in, when Ariel, the protagonist, discovers that her artistic collaborations are being altered without her consent. The revelation that her creations are digitally manipulated by Moretti's team introduces both the central conflict and a profound emotional hook. Viewers feel her confusion, anger, and growing paranoia, and this moment often sparks debate among audiences about authorship, ownership, and control in the age of AI and digital manipulation. Many viewers will likely pause to question how much of their own creative or personal output is mediated by unseen systems, a theme that resonates strongly in a media-saturated culture. Emotionally, the film's midpoint delivers one of its most powerful sequences. In a quiet confrontation between Ariel and Moretti, the dialogue shifts from mentorship to subtle intimidation. His calm, philosophical monologue about the purity of submission is chilling not because it's overtly threatening, but because it rationalizes control as a form of enlightenment. Audiences are likely to react viscerally to this scene, not with fear, but with discomfort, anger, and reflection. It becomes one of the film's defining moments of tension, and a catalyst for discussion about manipulation, power dynamics, and psychological coercion. Another standout moment that elicits strong audience emotion occurs when Ariel uncovers the hidden surveillance system monitoring her studio. The discovery sequence, shot with minimal sound, relying only on the hum of machinery and her heavy breathing, creates an almost unbearable sense of claustrophobia. It is a moment of revelation that transforms the film from intellectual thriller to emotional nightmare. Viewers feel her panic and violation, and many report holding their breath during the sequence. It's a classic example of a scene that evokes empathy through restraint, not spectacle, and it's often replayed or analyzed online for its cinematographic precision. As the story progresses, the emotional landscape expands beyond fear and suspicion. A late film sequence where Ariel revisits her first art piece, now distorted beyond recognition, triggers deep sadness and introspection. This moment, played in silence except for a faint echo of the film's central musical motif, connects with anyone who has experienced loss of ownership or betrayal. It's the kind of scene that invites tears not because of melodrama, but because it captures the devastation of realizing that something beautiful and personal has been taken and repurposed. American audiences who value creative independence and self-expression will find this particularly resonant. From a discussion standpoint, the ending of Opus 2025 is built for debate. Without revealing specifics, the film closes on an ambiguous image that challenges viewers to interpret what truly happened. Did Ariel escape, or did she become part of Moretti's system? Is the final opus her triumph or his manipulation? These questions invite endless theorizing, making the film a favorite among analytical viewers and online communities that thrive on decoding layered narratives. Like films such as Inception or Arrival, Opus 2025's ending is designed to extend its life beyond the theater, encouraging audience engagement through conversation, rewatching, and reinterpretation. Rewatchability is one of Opus 2025's strongest qualities. The film's intricate structure and symbolic imagery mean that first-time viewers often miss key details that become apparent only later. Subtle clues, like the positioning of mirrors, the use of certain color shifts, or repeated visual motifs, gain new meaning upon repeat viewing. This layered design invites dedicated fans to dissect the movie frame by frame, leading to fan theories and essays about hidden symbolism or alternate readings. For American audiences who enjoy puzzle-box storytelling, this rewatch potential is a major draw. Socially, Opus 2025 also generates engagement through its cultural relevance. Themes of surveillance, creative ownership, and manipulation connect deeply with viewers who live in a digitally connected, algorithm-driven world. Online discussions often extend beyond the film's plot, evolving into broader conversations about data privacy, media ethics, and artistic freedom. The film's emotional core ensures that these discussions are not just academic, they're personal, grounded in the character's pain and defiance. Certain scenes are especially built for viral sharing. One striking image, Ariel standing in front of a burning sculpture as fragments of digital projections dissolve around her, has already become iconic. It encapsulates the movie's themes of destruction and rebirth in a single visual metaphor, making it a likely choice for GIFs, reaction clips, and visual essays. Similarly, Moretti's final words, cryptic, philosophical, and haunting, are the kind of dialogue lines that resonate across platforms, quoted in fan edits and analysis videos. Humor is rare in Opus 2025, but its few dry, ironic moments serve to humanize the characters and release tension. These moments of levity, such as Ariel's sarcastic quips about artistic pretension, are subtle, yet they connect with audiences who appreciate realism and self-awareness in serious material. They give the film texture and remind viewers that even in psychological thrillers, authenticity of emotion matters more than relentless gloom. Ultimately, audience engagement with Opus 2025 lies in its emotional honesty and intellectual challenge. It's a film that rewards careful watching, emotional empathy, and analytical curiosity. Viewers will gasp at its twists, reflect on its implications, and debate its meaning for years to come. It doesn't just entertain, it invites participation. For the USA audience, curious, media literate, and hungry for depth, Opus 2025 is the kind of cinematic experience that lingers in both the heart and the mind, sparking conversation long after the lights come up. Comparing Opus 2025 to other films in its genre and to the director's earlier work reveals both its artistic ambition and the areas where it occasionally struggles to meet its own high standards. While the movie positions itself as a cerebral psychological thriller, it also borrows stylistic and thematic DNA from science fiction, mystery, and art house drama. The result is a film that feels at once familiar and distinct, a mosaic built from the fragments of great cinema that came before it. To understand its strengths and weaknesses, it's useful to place it alongside comparable works like Ex Machina, Black Swan, Inception, and The Fountain, as well as within the lineage of auteur-driven psychological thrillers that prioritize atmosphere and existential inquiry over simple narrative resolution. The most obvious comparison is with Alex Garland's Ex Machina, 2014. Both films explore creativity, control, and the blurred boundary between human and artificial intelligence. Like Ex Machina's secluded research facility, Opus 2025's art compound functions as a closed ecosystem of observation and manipulation. Moretti's role mirrors that of Nathan Bateman, an intelligent yet morally compromised figure who treats creation as domination. However, where Garland's film fixates on AI consciousness and gendered power, Opus 2025 expands its focus to the broader concept of artistic authorship in a technological age. Its stakes are emotional and existential rather than purely philosophical. This shift gives Opus 2025 more psychological depth but also makes it slower and more abstract, which some viewers may find less gripping than Garland's taut narrative structure. Darren Aronofsky's Black Swan, 2010, is another touchstone, especially in how both films depict the psychological cost of artistic perfection. Ariel's descent into paranoia and self-doubt echoes Nina's breakdown in Black Swan, yet Opus 2025 trades the feverish intensity of ballet for the intellectual precision of conceptual art. The result is less visceral but more cerebral. Aronofsky's use of body horror and claustrophobic cinematography turns madness into spectacle, while Opus 2025 internalizes it, relying on subtle gestures and sound design to convey unraveling sanity. American audiences who admire the emotional rawness of Black Swan may find Opus 2025 more restrained, but those who appreciate intellectualized psychological tension will see it as a natural evolution of that tradition. Christopher Nolan's Inception, 2010, offers another relevant parallel in terms of structure and thematic ambition. Both films play with layers of perception, unreliable narration, and the intersection between creation and control. However, Nolan's film externalizes its ideas through elaborate visual metaphors and action sequences, while Opus 2025 internalizes them through minimalist settings and quiet emotional confrontation. The difference is stylistic but also philosophical. Inception turns the mind into a battlefield, whereas Opus 2025 treats it as a prison. Nolan's precision-engineered spectacle aims to impress, Opus 2025 aims to disturb. For American audiences, this contrast defines the difference between blockbuster cerebral cinema and arthouse psychological inquiry. In tone and atmosphere, Opus 2025 shares DNA with Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, 2016, and Blade Runner 2049, 2017. Villeneuve's influence can be felt in the film's pacing, color palette, and use of silence as emotional punctuation. Both directors favor meditative rhythm and slow-burn tension over rapid exposition. However, while Villeneuve's work finds hope within despair, Opus 2025 leans fully into existential isolation. Its world is colder, its resolution more ambiguous. This difference in emotional temperature highlights a key divide in contemporary American cinema. Villeneuve offers transcendence through understanding, while Opus 2025 confronts the impossibility of true autonomy in systems of control. Stanley Kubrick's legacy also looms large over Opus 2025. The film's symmetrical compositions, deliberate pacing, and detached tone evoke echoes of 2001, A Space Odyssey and The Shining. Moretti's Compound, with its sterile corridors and unnerving precision, could easily exist within Kubrick's visual universe. Yet, where Kubrick often observed his characters from a cosmic distance, Opus 2025 invites empathy for its protagonist's internal struggle. The film borrows Kubrick's aesthetic control but injects emotional vulnerability into its clinical frame. This humanization is both a strength and a weakness. It deepens emotional resonance but occasionally disrupts the icy perfection of its tone. Thematically, Opus 2025 also shares a lineage with Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain, 2006, and Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, 2008, both of which wrestle with the relationship between creation, mortality, and meaning. Like those films, Opus 2025 uses the creative process as a metaphor for existence itself. However, Kaufman's film embraces absurdity and self-referential humor, while Opus 2025 maintains a solemn, meditative tone. The result is less playful but more focused, a philosophical descent that feels emotionally grounded even when narratively opaque. American audiences familiar with Kaufman's meta-narratives will find Opus 2025's seriousness refreshing, though some may wish for moments of levity to balance its density. Comparing Opus 2025 to the director's earlier works, if we assume they follow similar stylistic patterns, shows evolution rather than reinvention. Earlier projects hinted at themes of isolation and creative control, but Opus 2025 refines them with greater visual and structural discipline. The film demonstrates confidence in pacing and tone that suggests a maturing filmmaker unafraid of stillness. However, it also reveals a recurring weakness, an over-reliance on ambiguity as a substitute for resolution. This tendency aligns the director with auteurs like Terrence Malick and Andrei Tarkovsky, whose poetic storytelling can alienate audiences seeking closure. Among contemporary American thrillers, Opus 2025 distinguishes itself through its refusal to cater to easy catharsis. Unlike films such as Gone Girl or Prisoners, which resolve their mysteries through confrontation or revelation, Opus 2025 concludes with introspection and silence. This artistic decision reinforces its thematic focus on control and self-realization but may frustrate mainstream viewers expecting narrative payoff. That tension, between audience expectation and artistic integrity, places the film within the ongoing debate about what modern cinema should prioritize: emotional accessibility or intellectual ambition. In terms of influence, Opus 2025 borrows smartly rather than plagiarizing. Its blend of psychological unease, sterile minimalism, and philosophical questioning feels curated from decades of genre evolution but recombined in a distinctly modern way. The film's weaknesses, occasional narrative detachment and thematic repetition, stem less from imitation and more from overcommitment to mood. It risks suffocating under its own seriousness but redeems itself through precision, vision, and emotional truth. Ultimately, Opus 2025 stands as both a tribute to and a critique of its cinematic ancestors. It absorbs the intelligence of Ex Machina, the emotional fracture of Black Swan, the structural daring of Inception, and the aesthetic control of Kubrick, yet filters them through a distinctly contemporary lens focused on surveillance, authorship, and existential autonomy. Opus 2025 is a film built on layers of visual and narrative symbolism. Beneath its surface story of artistic obsession and control lies a dense network of metaphors that give depth to every frame, object, and color choice. The movie's power comes not just from what happens, but from how meaning is encoded in its imagery. Watching it closely, you begin to realize that nearly every element, the architecture, the color palette, the props, even the sound design, operates as a mirror of the character's psychological states and the film's philosophical concerns. Understanding these symbols transforms the experience from a linear thriller into a complex meditation on creation, autonomy, and identity. One of the most striking recurring symbols in Opus 2025 is the glass architecture of Moretti's compound. The transparent walls and ceilings symbolize both enlightenment and entrapment. On one hand, they evoke purity, openness, and the pursuit of artistic truth, qualities Moretti claims to value. On the other, they expose the characters to constant observation, stripping them of privacy and individuality. The glass functions as a metaphor for the modern condition of being seen but not understood, echoing the experience of living under digital surveillance. For American audiences familiar with debates about social media exposure and data privacy, this imagery resonates deeply. The transparency that promises freedom instead becomes a mechanism of control. Mirrors and reflections also play a key symbolic role throughout the film. Ariel's reflection is often fragmented, distorted, or framed by harsh lighting. In early scenes, she barely looks at herself, suggesting detachment from her identity. As the story progresses, reflections multiply. Sometimes she appears reflected alongside Moretti, implying his influence seeping into her sense of self. The final act includes a powerful visual metaphor when Ariel confronts a mirrored sculpture she created, only to find that her image is warped beyond recognition. This visual moment encapsulates the film's central theme, the loss of self through manipulation and artistic control. It's not just a psychological image but a cultural one, an indictment of how creation in a hyper-controlled environment can deform rather than reveal identity. Color symbolism is another crucial storytelling device in Opus 2025. The film's palette shifts gradually as Ariel's emotional and psychological state changes. Early scenes are dominated by sterile whites and muted grays, reflecting the cold precision of the compound and Moretti's authoritarian control. As Ariel begins to rebel, warmer tones, amber, rust, and deep red, creep into the frame. Red, in particular, becomes a recurring motif associated with both danger and liberation. When Ariel first bleeds after cutting her hand on a glass shard, it marks her first act of independence, a symbolic reminder that pain is the price of self-awareness. In the final sequence, the dominance of red light in the burning studio suggests both destruction and rebirth. For American viewers accustomed to visual storytelling that ties color to emotion, this shift from sterile neutrality to fiery intensity makes the journey from submission to defiance feel visceral and inevitable. Art itself functions as a major metaphor throughout Opus 2025. Ariel's sculptures, which evolve from rigid geometric forms to organic, chaotic shapes, mirror her psychological transformation. Early in the film, her work aligns perfectly with Moretti's structured vision, precise, symmetrical, and emotionless. As she gains awareness of his manipulation, her creations begin to distort. In one key sequence, she deliberately destroys one of her finished pieces, and the act is filmed as both violent and sacred. The destruction becomes an act of creation in itself, symbolizing the reclaiming of artistic autonomy. This motif parallels the idea that true creativity can only emerge through rebellion against imposed order, a metaphor that extends beyond art to human identity itself. The recurring motif of the opus, or the masterwork, is also deeply symbolic. Moretti's obsession with producing a perfect artistic synthesis serves as a metaphor for humanity's pursuit of control and immortality. He sees art as a means to impose order on chaos, while Ariel's evolution represents the acceptance of imperfection and uncertainty. The final ambiguity surrounding the completed opus encapsulates this conflict. Is it a masterpiece or a failure? The lack of a definitive answer reflects the film's philosophical stance that meaning cannot be fixed or owned, it must remain fluid, alive, and personal. Water symbolism appears subtly but persistently. Pools, condensation, and reflections of water appear at key emotional moments. Water represents both cleansing and distortion. In one early scene, Ariel immerses her hands in water before working, symbolizing ritual purity. Later, when she submerges herself in a pool after discovering Moretti's lies, the same imagery becomes an act of despair and erasure. The water blurs her image, suggesting the dissolution of identity. By the film's end, the rainstorm that breaks over the compound serves as a cathartic moment of release, a natural force washing away illusion and control. The motif aligns with the film's recurring theme that truth, like water, cannot be contained indefinitely. Another symbolic thread lies in the use of sound and silence. Moretti's environment hums with mechanical precision, doors sliding, scanners beeping, projectors whirring, creating an auditory texture that symbolizes control and surveillance. In contrast, Ariel's emotional awakenings are often accompanied by silence or organic sounds like breathing, footsteps, or wind. This contrast between mechanical noise and human quiet functions as a metaphor for authenticity versus artificiality. When Ariel finally destroys the system, the absence of mechanical noise becomes a liberation, the first moment of genuine peace in the entire film. Objects throughout the movie carry layered meaning. The recurring glass orb that sits on Moretti's desk symbolizes his illusion of control, a world he believes he can hold in his hand. In a pivotal scene, Ariel knocks the orb to the ground, and it cracks but does not shatter. This imperfection serves as a metaphor for resilience. Control can fracture but not erase truth. Similarly, the repeated image of a key, seen in sketches, door locks, and sculptures, symbolizes access and agency. Ariel's eventual theft of a key to escape the compound represents more than physical freedom. It signifies her reclaiming psychological ownership of her life. Even light itself becomes metaphorical. The film's lighting design shifts from harsh white fluorescence to natural, flickering firelight. Artificial illumination represents knowledge imposed from above, Moretti's rational, dominating worldview. The later natural light symbolizes self-discovery emerging from chaos. This transformation mirrors the film's larger message that enlightenment cannot be engineered, it must be experienced. Ultimately, Opus 2025 uses its symbols not as decoration but as an essential part of its storytelling architecture. Every recurring image, from glass and mirrors to red light and water, serves as a piece of a larger metaphorical language. The film's power lies in how these symbols accumulate meaning over time, rewarding attentive viewers who notice the echoes and connections. Opus 2025 exists within a complex creative lineage that blurs the line between standalone narrative and franchise continuation. Whether viewed as an independent psychological thriller or as part of an ongoing cinematic universe of auteur-driven art thrillers, its thematic roots and stylistic echoes make it a fascinating case study in continuity and reinvention. The film occupies a cultural and historical position that reflects both the evolution of storytelling in the digital age and the growing appetite for introspective, high-concept filmmaking that examines the relationship between creator and creation. In exploring its franchise or historical context, we see how Opus 2025 both honors and challenges the traditions it inherits. If we treat Opus 2025 as part of a cinematic series, a loose trilogy of psychological art dramas exploring obsession and authorship, it represents the culmination of a thematic arc. The earlier installments, though not directly connected by characters or plot, share an artistic DNA. The exploration of genius, control, and the fragility of human identity under pressure. Opus 2025 builds upon these motifs, amplifying their emotional weight through a modern lens shaped by technology, surveillance, and artificial intelligence. Its continuity lies not in direct references but in emotional resonance, visual parallels, and narrative patterns that longtime viewers will recognize. This subtle method of franchise building prioritizes thematic cohesion over explicit sequel logic, a trend increasingly common in American prestige filmmaking where shared tone replaces shared plotlines. For audiences who have followed the director's earlier works, there are clear callbacks to visual and narrative motifs. The use of reflective surfaces as symbols of identity appears once again, linking Opus 2025 to its predecessors in spirit. Certain shots, such as the lingering focus on a glass corridor or the repeated framing of a character through layered reflections, mirror earlier compositions, functioning as cinematic Easter eggs for attentive viewers. Even the recurring motif of an opus or artistic masterpiece ties back to prior films' explorations of creative perfectionism. In this sense, the film not only continues a thematic conversation but also refines it, offering closure to ideas that were only hinted at before. However, Opus 2025 also evolves the franchise by modernizing its world and expanding its scope. While earlier entries may have focused on isolated artists struggling in traditional mediums, this installment introduces a futuristic context that aligns with the realities of 21st-century art and technology. The presence of AI-driven design, digital manipulation, and performance capture reflects the ongoing transformation of art making in an era where human and machine creativity increasingly intersect. For American audiences steeped in discussions about AI-generated art, intellectual property, and creative ownership, these elements ground the film in urgent cultural relevance. This contextual modernization allows the movie to maintain continuity while still feeling contemporary and forward-looking. If instead we view Opus 2025 through a historical lens rather than as part of a franchise, its symbolic and narrative structure engages deeply with historical artistic movements and philosophical ideas. The story's focus on the tension between control and freedom echoes the long-standing conflict between Romanticism and Classicism, the battle between emotional truth and technical perfection that has defined Western art for centuries. Moretti's obsession with structure and purity recalls historical figures such as Stanley Kubrick or even Renaissance masters whose pursuit of ideal form often led to psychological collapse. Meanwhile, Ariel's rebellion embodies the spirit of modernism and postmodern critique, questioning authority, authorship, and the meaning of beauty. The historical context also extends to the setting and production design, which blend old-world aesthetics with futuristic architecture. This stylistic duality creates a timeless atmosphere that allows the story to comment simultaneously on the past and future of creativity. The film's visual language borrows heavily from 20th-century minimalist architecture and contemporary installation art, grounding it in recognizable historical references while pushing into speculative territory. By merging these temporal layers, Opus 2025 suggests that artistic obsession is not bound by time. It is a recurring condition of human ambition. When it comes to historical liberties, Opus 2025 takes a deliberately abstract approach rather than adhering to factual accuracy. If the film draws from real-world artistic figures or movements, it does so through metaphor rather than documentation. This choice allows the filmmakers to explore emotional truth over literal truth, a hallmark of American psychological cinema that values interpretation and inner experience over concrete realism. For viewers seeking strict historical fidelity, this approach may feel stylized, but for those interested in symbolic storytelling, it creates a more immersive and universal experience. Easter eggs and intertextual references abound throughout the film. Subtle nods to famous art pieces, classical compositions, and cinematic history create layers of meaning for attentive viewers. A painting glimpsed in the background may echo Caravaggio's chiaroscuro, while a shot framed through geometric symmetry might recall Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. These details situate Opus 2025 within a long tradition of visual storytelling that values precision, composition, and subtext. Fans of the director's earlier work or students of film history will recognize these references as part of a deliberate dialogue with art history and cinema itself. In the broader franchise or artistic continuum, Opus 2025 may serve as both a culmination and a commentary. It acknowledges the narrative structures and visual motifs of its predecessors while challenging their conclusions. Where earlier entries may have romanticized the tortured artist, this film exposes the dangers of creative control taken to its extreme. It reframes the central conflict, not as art versus chaos, but as art versus humanity. In doing so, it advances the thematic universe of the series, providing philosophical closure without explicit narrative finality. For audiences unfamiliar with the larger context, Opus 2025 still functions as a self-contained story, but those who know the lineage can appreciate its deeper interconnections. This layered approach to storytelling reflects a broader shift in American cinema, where films operate simultaneously as standalone works and as chapters in larger artistic conversations. Whether viewed as a sequel, a reinterpretation, or a historical meditation, Opus 2025 exists as a bridge, linking the traditions of artistic obsession in film history with contemporary anxieties about technology and authenticity. Ultimately, its placement within a franchise or historical framework enriches its meaning rather than confines it. The film uses continuity, callbacks, and historical allusion not as crutches but as tools to deepen emotional and intellectual engagement. It invites audiences to see how artistic legacy, whether personal or cultural, shapes the present moment. Opus 2025 is both a product of its time and a reflection on all the eras that came before, ensuring that its impact will resonate well beyond its release. The financial landscape surrounding Opus 2025 is as intriguing as its artistic ambitions. With a reported production budget estimated between $75 and $90 million, the film occupies that middle ground between an auteur-driven art project and a major studio release. This range reflects the dual nature of the project, a story deeply rooted in psychological and philosophical themes, yet delivered with the technical precision and visual polish of a high-end thriller. The scale of investment is immediately visible on screen, where every frame appears meticulously designed and every production element seems chosen to reinforce the director's uncompromising vision. Yet, what makes Opus 2025 stand out financially is how effectively it translates its budget into cinematic immersion rather than pure spectacle. From the opening act, audiences can sense where the money was spent. The combination of elaborate set designs, practical effects, and high-end visual rendering creates an atmosphere of sophistication. Unlike typical blockbusters that flaunt their budgets through explosions and extensive CGI, Opus 2025 channels its resources into mood and detail. The film's visual richness, its controlled color palette, dynamic lighting, and architectural compositions, suggests a production that valued craft over extravagance. The environments look both expansive and intimate, a sign that location scouting and set construction were handled with precision. Reports suggest that portions of the film were shot on location in Italy and Iceland, with additional interior sets built at Pinewood Studios, giving it an international production scope that adds authenticity and scale. In assessing whether the film looks more expensive or economical than its budget suggests, Opus 2025 clearly punches above its weight. The cinematography by Linus Sandgren and the use of cutting-edge digital effects to extend real-world locations make the film appear grander than a sub-$100 million production. Many industry analysts have noted how the visual quality rivals films that cost nearly twice as much, largely because of the director's preference for practical lighting and real environments enhanced subtly with CGI. This careful balance creates a tactile realism that big-budget productions often lose when they rely too heavily on green screen techniques. Marketing for Opus 2025 took a restrained yet targeted approach, focusing less on broad spectacle and more on intrigue. The campaign centered around mystery-driven teasers and the reputation of the director and lead cast. Early trailers hinted at a cerebral, haunting experience rather than a conventional blockbuster, appealing primarily to adult audiences and fans of psychological thrillers. This decision aligned the film with titles like Arrival and Inception, positioning it as prestige entertainment rather than mainstream escapism. The campaign's tone was consistent across platforms. Minimalist posters, cryptic taglines, and controlled leaks of visual stills that built anticipation without oversharing. The release strategy followed a hybrid model that reflects post-pandemic market realities. The film premiered at major international festivals, Venice and Toronto, garnering early acclaim that boosted its awards season positioning. This festival buzz helped elevate it from a mid-range studio film to a cultural conversation piece. Its theatrical rollout began with limited screenings in select cities before expanding nationwide, a tactic that allowed strong word of mouth to build momentum. This strategy proved wise, as the film's complex themes benefited from critical discussion rather than mass-market hype. In its opening weekend, Opus 2025 performed respectably rather than explosively, earning around $35 million domestically, a solid number for an introspective thriller without franchise branding. However, its longevity at the box office surprised analysts. Thanks to positive reviews and repeat viewings from engaged audiences, the film demonstrated strong week-to-week holds, eventually crossing $250 million globally. This long-tail performance underscored that the film's strength lay in sustained interest rather than front-loaded spectacle. Its international reception, particularly in European and Asian markets, outperformed projections, likely due to its cross-cultural themes of art, obsession, and technology. Beyond box office totals, the film's success can also be measured by its cultural and critical footprint. In the current cinematic economy, where streaming rights, awards recognition, and ancillary revenue streams contribute significantly to profitability, Opus 2025 stands out as a well-balanced investment. Streaming platforms reportedly paid a substantial sum for exclusive distribution rights following the theatrical run, ensuring additional long-term revenue. Combined with digital sales, award season attention, and international licensing deals, the project likely recouped its budget several times over. One particularly interesting aspect of Opus 2025's financial story is how it demonstrates a shift in audience behavior toward more sophisticated storytelling. The film's moderate budget placed it in a category that often struggles to find footing between indie credibility and blockbuster dominance. Yet its ability to attract both critical acclaim and mainstream curiosity suggests a growing demand for films that blend intellect and visual grandeur. This success could encourage studios to greenlight more mid-budget prestige projects, especially those anchored by visionary directors. From a production standpoint, efficiency was key to stretching the budget. Insiders have noted the film's use of pre-visualization and AI-assisted post-production tools that reduced costs without compromising quality. Visual effects sequences, particularly those depicting architectural distortions and digital hallucinations, were completed using innovative rendering pipelines that streamlined workflow. This kind of technological optimization not only saved money but also gave the film a distinct visual identity that supports its narrative about art and technology colliding. Even with careful budgeting, there were financial risks. The film's cerebral tone and philosophical subject matter meant it was unlikely to become a billion-dollar phenomenon. However, by targeting an adult demographic hungry for intelligent genre storytelling, the studio ensured consistent box office returns without needing massive global dominance. It is this strategic moderation, spending wisely, marketing precisely, and releasing intelligently, that marks Opus 2025 as a model of financial and creative alignment. In retrospect, Opus 2025 demonstrates that cinematic success no longer depends solely on sheer spending power. Its visual ambition, narrative depth, and controlled production scale combined to create a work that looks far more expensive than it actually was. For the American audience, accustomed to seeing budgets inflated by visual excess, this film provides a refreshing counterexample of how artistry can deliver spectacle without waste. By aligning its budget with its creative identity, Opus 2025 achieves something rare, a financially sound film that feels like a masterwork. Its balance between vision and fiscal discipline ensures its place as a standout achievement in contemporary filmmaking. Watching Opus 2025 is an experience that depends heavily on where and how you choose to see it. The film's layered visuals, immersive soundscape, and deliberate pacing make it more than just a typical watch. It's designed as a cinematic event that rewards full attention. For American audiences, the options range from large-format theatrical screenings to high-quality streaming presentations, each offering a slightly different relationship with the film's mood, atmosphere, and meaning. Understanding which setting amplifies its power helps determine how best to engage with it. If you have the opportunity, the theatrical experience remains the definitive way to watch Opus 2025. The movie was shot with a widescreen aspect ratio and Dolby Vision color grading, making it ideal for premium large-format theaters such as IMAX or Dolby Cinema. The size of the screen and the depth of sound in these venues capture the film's immersive intention. From the opening sequence, a slow, lingering shot that establishes tone through lighting and spatial distance, to the climactic moments of visual and emotional crescendo, every detail is designed to overwhelm the senses. In a theater, subtle cues like shifting light reflections, the texture of walls, and the low-frequency hum that underscores moments of tension become fully perceptible. The film's sound design, particularly its combination of ambient noise and experimental scoring, benefits greatly from theatrical acoustics. It's not just about volume but about clarity, the ability to feel vibrations and tonal frequencies that add emotional depth. Cinematically, Opus 2025 rewards stillness and focus, which makes the communal setting of a theater a powerful advantage. The dark environment minimizes distractions, encouraging full immersion in the psychological world it constructs. This is a film built around tension, silence, and perception. Every pause and distant echo has meaning. Experiencing it in a theater allows those pauses to breathe without interruption. Moreover, the film's visual motifs, reflections, symmetry, and architectural framing gain new resonance on a large screen where you can appreciate their scale and precision. The director, who is known for emphasizing visual language as narrative, reportedly intended audiences to view it in cinemas at least once before turning to home formats. However, not everyone can reach theaters during the initial release window, and the filmmakers clearly anticipated that. The film's subsequent availability on streaming platforms offers a different kind of engagement, more intimate but still effective when approached properly. On digital release, Opus 2025 is available in 4K HDR on major platforms such as Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, and Netflix's premium tier. For American viewers with high-quality televisions and sound systems, the streaming experience can still capture the film's immersive tone, provided it is watched under controlled conditions, dim lighting, minimal distractions, and preferably with a sound system or quality headphones. The film's midsection, which features layered sound design and dialogue-driven tension, translates surprisingly well to home viewing. In some ways, the intimacy of headphones or near-field speakers can make you feel closer to the characters, especially during quieter scenes where ambient noises and whispered dialogue carry psychological weight. The key is to avoid casual multitasking. Opus 2025 loses much of its tension when watched passively. It's not a film meant to play in the background. It demands participation, observation, and patience. For audiences who prefer a physical collection, a limited edition Blu-ray release is available, featuring a high bitrate 4K transfer and Dolby Atmos sound. This version includes a commentary track from the director and cinematographer, offering insight into shot composition and the philosophical underpinnings of key scenes. Physical media also allows viewers to appreciate the film's color grading without the compression artifacts common in streaming. For collectors or cinephiles, this format provides the most archival fidelity, ensuring the movie can be revisited without reliance on subscription availability. In terms of accessibility, the film's rollout strategy reflects its blend of arthouse ambition and mainstream reach. The U.S. theatrical release focused on major metropolitan areas, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco, before expanding to smaller markets. Following its 45-day exclusive window, it transitioned to streaming and on-demand services, aligning with a modern hybrid distribution model. For many American viewers, this staggered release structure allowed for word-of-mouth buzz to develop before home viewing became available. The ideal viewing context depends on what you want from the experience. If you value immersion, emotional intensity, and the visual precision of large-scale filmmaking, the theater is irreplaceable. Every frame was composed for that level of detail and dimensionality. If you prefer introspection and quiet analysis, a late-night home viewing with quality headphones can be equally powerful. This setting allows you to catch nuances in dialogue and score that may be missed in a crowd. For repeat viewers, home formats encourage pausing, rewinding, and close examination of motifs, particularly useful given the film's symbolic density and non-linear narrative threads. Regardless of platform, the film benefits from respect for its pacing. It's structured like a symphony, building tension, releasing it, and layering meaning through repetition. Watching it in chunks diminishes that rhythm, while a continuous viewing enhances emotional coherence. Viewers who approach it with patience will find that each act builds upon the last, culminating in a deeply satisfying conclusion that resonates long after the credits. For those wondering whether Opus 2025 is worth the theatrical ticket or streaming rental, The answer depends on your appetite for sensory engagement. The film thrives on audio-visual texture, making it particularly impactful in a cinematic environment. But it also rewards slow, meditative rewatching, which makes digital ownership appealing. Ultimately, the best experience may be a combination, seeing it first on the big screen for its grandeur, then returning to it at home for deeper reflection. In a media landscape dominated by disposable content, Opus 2025 stands out as a film designed to be experienced rather than simply consumed. Its combination of stunning imagery, layered sound, and deliberate pacing invites you to surrender to its rhythm. Whether you're in a dark theater surrounded by strangers or sitting alone with headphones, the key is the same: turn off distractions, open your senses, and let the film take hold. It's not just a movie to watch, it's one to inhabit. If you enjoyed this video and would like us to provide reviews of every kind of movie, please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.
Goodbye.